Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's Midweek Geek. And it looks like my camera is struggling with the new attic environment. I was out of focus for a moment there, but that might be a bit of a benefit. Hello, all. Hello, Slan, Halakar, Saxius. Welcome to tonight's stream. We have more people due to join us a little later, so we should have quite a fulsome panel tonight. And in chat, I can see there's GM Cody, there's Mr. Baker, the Slan's chatting away in chat, and there's Shadow and Sun with his nice new greenness. That was Daniel Kearney. Daniel Kearney donated some memberships the other night, and you were one of the ones who got one. Hello, Gene. So, hello, fellas. Tell us about your gaming in the last week or so. Who wants to go first?
Well,
sure.
I can.
I have been. So my Saturday second edition game did not go on. I was poorly that day. I was better Sunday, where half of the group couldn't make it. So I had prepared a sort of pseudo one shot. Basically, I had prepared for the players to do some housekeeping, because they are out exploring in a new frontier. And they've just finished a major quest, so I could easily basically shoehorn them in to be back at the safety of the fort, where they now have to do some errands to lay the foundation for what is going to become, a center point for the next story arc, which is going to be oriented around the group's cleric and the group's paladin, as they're going to have some background stuff that's going to catch up with them on this new frontier, because they might have left their past behind, but the past is not forgetting them.
Good.
So
good.
Actions
have consequences.
Yes, I got to play a little bit as well. I'm playing a 1DM 1 player, where I almost got thrown in as a slave. My character lost a bet on the wrong political character, and I've now managed to sneak out along with basically my golden goose, the man who is supposed to become the equivalent of a Roman senator. I'm bringing him straight to the capital, where I am going to be trying to present him to the Senate itself and create a deadlock, because his brother, the NPC brother, has taken over the family estate, and they are.
I am hoping this involves you standing up and delivering a speech in Latin.
Well, so while I can't do that, it will be a little bit lost. The DM is Russian, so I don't think his Latin is as versed as mine, which is non-existent. Don't know. So we'll. I am planning on doing that, but my plan is to basically gridlock the NPC brother to create some attention and make him do some mistakes that I can then expose to the rest of the Senate to do an easy swap. Because the NPC family I'm working for, supply a lot of the grain and food for the nation, and that's very important, especially now that the Senate has declared war on the elves. They need a lot of food to supply their army.
Elves deserve it.
Well, we've been switching backwards and forwards, and I played an elf 2 campaigns ago, and yeah, I have certainly made them bastards with the way I've been playing them. Anyway, I'm done.
Cool. Well done. Slan, Halakar?
Well, Saturday morning I played in Gene's OSC game on the Discord, where the party in that typical fashion players have literally unleashed a horde of skeletons on the countryside.
Yes,
I believe the words "oops" came to mind.
Yes, oops. In fact, it was largely done by General Nutt, who didn't turn up for that session.
Yeah.
And
then
that was General Nutt's parting gift.
Yeah. And Monday evening, I played in Elfbait's By the Sword campaign.
I haven't caught up with the third one yet of that. I've watched the first 2, and that's something I do want to discuss in tonight's stream, because it is a low magic setting.
Yeah.
Halakar, has your game met recently?
I came down with a nice case of the flu, good old influenza A, not just that little pansy stomach stuff. So no, we had to cancel this weekend.
Oh,
I did some research. Apparently, that is a variation of the avian flu. So my story is, I had a chicken. I tried to turn invisible. Things went sideways from there. But I don't know if anybody else would understand. So no, we actually have to postpone until I think the second weekend of March is when we're going to get together next. But that
was a shame.
just gives me more time to come up with more fun things.
Yep. Well, my gaming, I played with Slan in Gene's game on Saturday, and yes, most of it was spent trying to get the hell away from a horde of skeletons, and I mean a horde. I mean, Daniel's playing a cleric. A 4th cleric in OSE can destroy 2d6 skeletons per round. That would have been no good. We were being utterly overwhelmed. There were many more than that. And so we tried to get away. We watched them all depart into the countryside. Now we've emerged, and we've just seen roving bands of skeletons just sort of aimlessly wandering around that we've unleashed on this innocent land. A whoopsie daisy.
Maybe you're just going to see more adventurers rise up.
Yeah,
maybe. Anyway, we play, and another thing I want to mention on the stream tonight is the game we played on Saturday, which was live streamed. That was Bear running it, and myself and Iman were playing in that, along with several names you might recognize in chat, such as Hungar, Cody, Malachi, and Max from Legion of Myth. And that game is going really nicely. We've got characters really sort of taking shape and lots of good interactions. And that too is a very grounded game. Low magic, and with a real sort of basis in European Middle Ages, chivalry, that sort of stuff. So it's going rather well. And then Monday was called off, but last night we played some Call of Cthulhu. And poor Iman. His character dipped below the 50% sanity threshold on Monday. And now he dreams of self-deletion every single night. He has dreams of deleting himself, achieving freedom, standing on this bridge, looking over a yawning chasm. There's water rushing below. And just as he's about to jump, he wakes up. And he's disappointed. Poor Iman. He has to play a depressed character now, until his character can get some serious treatment. He is badly depressed. Such is the state of Lausanne at the time of Horror on the Orient Express. It's a very depressed place. But they're about to find out why. Anyway, that was that game. That was a good game last night. It's the first game I've run up in my new location. You might see me wrapped up a little warmer than usual. I'm now in the attic. You can see my dartboard behind me. There is also a pool table over there. And there's no heat insulation in the roof. Well, not much. It's a very basic, very basic rubbish. There's no sound insulation up here. But I'm not going to be told to keep quiet at 11 o'clock so much now by my family, who are trying to sleep while I'm streaming. So there we go. It comes with trade-offs. So I've had to wrap up warm. Currently, I have a t-shirt, hoodie, fleece. It all feels a bit cumbersome, but hey ho, you've got to do it. Got to do it to keep the family happy. Right. So, hello, you're wrong. Magic and fantasy can come with a lot of rules. Sometimes a good old-fashioned hack and slash is refreshing. Absolutely. That's what Saturday's game could have become. Could easily have become, but it would have been us getting hacked and slashed at.
Oh, yeah.
If we hadn't been very careful. Very much so. It got quite frightening at times. Yes.
I was never so happy to find 8 spikes in a treasure chest.
Well, yes, those spikes got used, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
Hammer, door, hammer, delay the skeletons, delay them, run. But yeah, it was good. It was good. And this Saturday, it's going to be Gingerbeard running the session, I believe, with me running Merp in the evening. So there we go. Anyway, we're going to talk about low magic, low fantasy. Most of us have a good idea what defines low magic. It really means that magic items are not found in every treasure, in every cache of treasures. There is not a mage on every corner. If you want to find magic, if it exists in the world, you have to seek it out. Magic using people tend to be revered or reviled for various reasons. It's the sort of game where you can't just go to a temple and get healed. You'll have maybe much more gradual healing rates. Maybe seek out people who can make poultices for just mild healing, and the gods tend to stand back a little bit as well in low magic settings. Whereas in more high magic settings, there's obviously a lot more in the way of things going whiz and bang and divine beings intervening and all that sort of thing. Low magic and low fantasy aren't the same thing. I know some people do mix them up. Low fantasy, I like low fantasy, non-earth shattering events. You can build up to an earth shattering event eventually, but the bulk of the campaign is just regular people trying to get by. Well, not quite regular people, adventurers, but somewhat insignificant adventurers, at least at the beginning. And it's the whole story of becoming a hero to me. I would like initially to hear your own definitions of, I mean, that's my definition of low fantasy. I'd like to hear what you consider to be low fantasy. Give some examples in literature or film.
Okay, I'll go. One of the things about low fantasy is that the creatures and other things you'll encounter tend to be real. You know, you're not going to encounter owl bears in a cave. You're going to encounter a bear. You might want to push it a bit, a little bit like Elfbait does, where, you know, prehistoric creatures, mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and whatnot are around. But these are creatures we know for a fact have existed, some of them in historical times. So for me, low fantasy will have very few, elves, fairies. It might even have very few goblins and orcs, because they're fantasy creatures too, even though they're not imbued with magic.
The key is most often, though, in fantasy games, it'll have some, won't it?
Yes, it will. It may have some, but it's a range. There's no line that says this is hard, So you can have a low fantasy game where the only humanoid race is essentially humans, and any encounter with anything else is rare. And I would like to point out that I think it was in the first edition DM's guide where there's a mention that for a player group, gnomes or dwarves might be mythical creatures, and when they actually encounter some, it totally changes their view of the world. And low fantasy settings should have that kind of encounter with.
Yeah. I mean, I ran a 2E campaign. I wanted to drag down the level of fantasy, not to what the lowest level of fantasy, but we began with a settlement that was only humans and halflings. And in order to, at the start, the players didn't even know whether any other races existed in terms of playable races, the demi-human races. And they did, but they were in little pockets secreted away. And the idea was that they wouldn't be playable to the players until good relations had been developed with them. They had to be found first, then relations had to be developed with them. And if they got off on the wrong foot, then they would be enemies. The game did sort of spiral a little bit into higher fantasy, but I think that's quite natural with D&D. As you go up through the levels, quite often the fantasy expands and grows.
Mm-hmm.
Zaxius, your thoughts?
On low fantasy is, for me, where you start bringing out restrictions for the availability and contact of what is defined as fantastical. I usually would start out using whatever. So if I use European, landscapes, I would then go, right, we're going very European with like historical inspirations. You're going to have all of this information. All of this is going to be laid out here, and this is now where you're starting out from. And it's going to be very much oriented towards, you are from a community. You're not really going to be overly diverse. You're not going to be coming from great distances or from very different, groups. If you are something unique, like if you are a dwarf, you're going to be the son of the only dwarf family in that, town. And you're probably going to be someone that has had to endure a lot of being picked on because there's not that kind of, environment for it. That's how I sort of go about the low fantasy. There's a lot of restrictions for the players, but that's also because I then want to then make the exploration of the world a lot bigger focus, because I don't want the players to think, oh, I know what an elf is. It's like, no, I could be using Nordic elves, and they're different from Tolkien elves. Significantly different from Tolkien elves, and equally so, I might turn around and say I don't want to use trolls from D&D. I might say, you know what, I'm going to be using Germanic trolls. Again, they're different. If you go in and do your research on what they are, they're going to be different. So again, the fantasy is going to be molded in the degrees from there, and it's then down for me to then keep the stakes in a level where as the players advance, the fantasy stays relevant to that campaign, but not to the point of where it then starts becoming, bam, you're now in, the Fey world where everything's fantastical. It's, the gradual build up where it is a organic progression, organic exposure to what is natural for the group's escapades. And then it sort of goes from there. And low magic is, as we all said, it's the dial down on magic. Even more so, like I've got a book somewhere here, Lion and Dragon, where it's straight up says, a wizard is not just a wizard, hoogity boogity boo. He's an alchemist. He's a doctor with a high understanding of it, or he's an engineer. He's a learned man. And then there's more to magic than just, knowing an arcane spell. There's actually a degree and an education that goes behind it, or understanding the stars for divination. So that's sort of my approach to it.
Okay, Halakar, any thoughts?
For me, low fantasy can take one of two different paths, I guess. One would be that the experience itself would be more of a war game setting. I mean, it could be, even as far as like the Knights of the Round Table, at the point when they're searching for the Holy Grail. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily have to have Merlin and everything going on behind the scenes, but something that's an exploration or quest that's going to take them through a lot of, to them, strange and unusual lands and meet other humans that are just different from them. Or it would be something that's more of the action adventure type, like a Indiana Jones movie or a Tarzan or something like that, where again, not a lot of necessarily outlandish magic. I mean, there are some exotic races. You might run across a witch doctor that makes a couple of herbal concoctions that can aid and assist in various ways. But it's not going to be what we would typically think of as magic in a campaign.
Okay. Hello, Daniel. Are you about?
Yes, I am. How are you?
How are you? How are you? So, your feelings on low magic and low fantasy? Are you which camp are you in terms of preferring high or low, or have a go at defining your low fantasy?
My low fantasy, I think they did it very well in the Lankmar setting.
Yep.
If you guys are familiar with that,
Oh yeah.
I think that's the epitome of low fantasy. There's two powerful magic users, and even then, and they reached sponsors of Fafford and Grey Mouser. It was Seven Eyes, and I forget the other one. But even then, the spell casting took 10 times longer than what the normal casting time was. So you didn't do a magic missile now. You know, by the time you did your magic missile, the fight was over. They didn't have very many weird creatures or anything like that.
They had a few, but they were oddities, weren't they? What I
Yeah.
remember.
But
Yeah.
to me, low magic, if you get a +2 sword, you're having a very, very, very good day. And low fantasy, to me, I think it was Saxius said it. And I think Slan said it also. And actually, Halakar, I think, said the same thing. You don't have a lot of off creatures, it's mainly human based. Anything else is like 1 in 1,000, you might see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, in general, it seems low fantasy is the main defining factor seems to be that the world is relatable. We
Correct.
see people who look like us as humans as being very predominant in the world, and anything that is different is likely to be treated as different because it's unusual.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that seems to be a key factor. RPG Grandma says, "What is the fantasy 2? Science, magic, technology, aliens, and so on." It comes down to, I mean, here we have definitions of fantasy as a fantasy or fantasy as a genre. Fantasy as a genre certainly has a different implication, I think. So we're looking at sort of medieval era, but obviously technology, science can all come into that. And yeah, low magic, low fantasy, you it's not a reliance on magic, it's a reliance on things you grow, things you mix. You might visit a herbalist who might be mixing a potion. Potions could well exist, but they are things that are grown, ingredients are harvested. There's a degree of real, almost pseudo real world science that goes into their production. I think that's one way. I mean, where do you place Tolkien on high and low magic, high and low fantasy? Because this is an often argued about fact. I'm running MERP on a Saturday night, and so far the whole thing is pretty low fantasy, pretty low magic. There's been very little in the way of special items, very little in the way of spell casting. MERP as a game, your healing mostly comes from these herbs that are picked, are foraged in the wild, and the majority of the party's enemies so far have been human. So where do you place Tolkien in this? Or would you put him in the middle?
I would put him straight into high fantasy and high magic.
Agreed.
You would?
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely would. Like, the books, Gandalf casts magic left, right, and center. He does not hold back. It is not the movies. He spams his cantrips. He knows they go to sleep. He's casting Sanctuary, Circle of Protections. He's throwing, Wall of Force. It is all out there. Gandalf is
A lot
up
of it is
there.
implied, though, isn't it? A lot of
No.
it's implied.
No,
It
he
is.
slings a walk across the camp when they're traveling from what's it called, the Elven City.
Duralumin is right here. Do you mean Lord of the Rings Tolkien or Silmarillion Tolkien?
No, I'm meaning Lord of the Rings.
Right. Okay.
In Lord of the Rings, it is significantly dialed back from the Silmarillion because that is way out there. But even Tolkien by Lord of the Rings, Gandalf was slinging things out left, right, and center. The same with Sauron and what Sauron was doing with building the Uruk-hais and the armies, the Palantirs that they were using to spy upon each other. Just look at the Haradrims, the Oliphants, the Shelob, the Army of the Dead. There are a number of things that are high fantasy within.
I
Lord
won't
of the
say
Rings.
it's. I mean, where I disagree is that I don't think Tolkien is very high fantasy, because look at modern iterations of Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms, the melting pot of a world where it's seemingly almost anybody with any adventuring nous has the ability to do something that feels magical all the time at will.
Yeah, you're looking at kind of a travesty there, though. I mean, that's
I am. Yes, I'm bringing out an extreme example.
A dragster is not going to be a fast car,
Yeah.
Well, I can understand that. Like, again, if we look at MERP, the role-playing game, you are not playing as the members of the Fellowship of the Ring. You are not the captain of the Gondorian army. You are not the captain of the Rangers of the Elven Forest. I don't know all the names, forgive me, but like, you are not these already high established epic characters. You are Billy Bob Bisons, who have come from the Lancashire, and he is out here to find his missing turnips. And while he has been doing that, them darn orcs have stolen his tobacco, and he's going to go out and tell them what. That's my impression of MERP. You are farmers, you are everyday folk who is just having to deal with the fact that there's a big, terrible guy. The Witch King of Angmar is doing his tiddlyfuckings, and you just happen to be a bystander when, Angmar is trying to rise up again. So there's a difference, though. So I would still make the argument that Tolkien and his world is high fantasy and high magic, because look at all the magical items from the books that are being dished out and that are available to the characters. And look at the overarching story and the themes within, these stories. They are very much oriented towards a good versus evil. We will triumph over this, and it's very much backed by a lot of these, powerful forces. You could almost say that's my stance at the very least.
Personally, though, I think Tolkien has a lot of relatability to it.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot going on in the world that makes it feel quite grounded.
Have you ever actually read into Tolkien and his lifestyle and what he liked?
I went to the same school as him, but not really.
Okay, going to the same school and being in the same building does not equate the same as sharing the same room and air as him.
No, of course it is. No.
So my point is, he, as a person, he loved the idea of living. Look at the hobbits. That is his idealized lifestyle.
Yes.
That is what he loved. That's what's grounded about him. As an Englishman, you can definitely understand. That's me as a Dane. I can see the appeal of it, but that's the thing that most people enjoy. It's the idea of having a stylized life where there is comfort, but there's also there's a level of like.
I'd love to live in a little rustic cottage in Worcestershire or Shropshire, somewhere like that. To be beautiful.
But he breathed life into the characters, and they came from different walks of life. Boromir came from the captain of Gondor. He had his own devils that he was fighting with, and Tolkien breathed a lot of life into that because you began to understand where he came from. It was also shown when you meet Faramir and how the whole brotherly, not rivalry, but like the relationship that the brothers would have with each other and their father and everything that would follow from there. There was a lot of life that's been brought into it. But that's also, again, that's his way of making it relatable, which bringing it back to low fantasy, it's a key thing. You need to make it relatable for the players.
I think there's a key scene, and it's not one most people think of in Lord of the Rings, the books, and it is the scene where Frodo and Samwise see the Oliphants for the first time.
Yes.
And I have always read that as Northern Europeans seeing an elephant for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It is not this ginormous elephant-like creature with extra tusks like we've seen in the movies. That was actually for me a big disappointment, because I think elephants on their own can be fantastical enough, and I think that scene also, I think, brings Tolkien back from being 100% high fantasy. The relatableness of the characters too, but just that scene, the fact that things that we may have found wondrous and fantastic in our everyday world, they also find wondrous and fantastic.
I think in that sense, I mean, the hobbits themselves are the ones we can most easily relate to, because they are the most normal.
Yes.
I'm just trying to find the description of oliphants again, because
it's something big as a house, and I forgot the exact
But they're meant to be great beasts of burdens either way. You have a good point.
Okay, so yes, people in chat, D&D has evolved into extreme high fantasy in
That's all right.
particularly in recent years, but that's been an ever-going process. I mean, I would argue that D&D in a nutshell has never been low magic, low fantasy, unless the DM has specifically taken steps to alter it, restrict things, and bring things down. And it's certainly easier at low levels to do that, but as characters go up to higher levels, it becomes more difficult. There are certain expectations of higher level characters, which lend their weight towards higher magic, higher fantasy situations. Right. So what are the main benefits of a low fantasy game?
Well, when you start with a low fantasy game, because you have already sort of like preambled with there's going to be very little magic, it means magic is special.
Yeah.
So off the bat, if let's say you turn around and say, fine, we're playing, let's take with D&D. Let's take first edition D&D. Just take, most of us are familiar with that here.
Yeah.
If you just say, right, we're just going to roll the characters, and we're going to up the requirements of a wizard. Suddenly, a wizard is actually, rather than having 9 intelligence, you put it up to, let's say, 13. Well, now that wizard is actually a lot more special, because 13 on the bell curve, not exactly the most common of a stat you're going to get, but still doable. So he's now suddenly important. He's got a stat that's important, and he is. You might even be able to turn around and say things such as, or at least what I did, which was, there are no more wizards in this entire village. Out of the, let's say, 3,000 people that live in this village, you are the only one that has been able to figure out how to read and write this thing. And you now have to come from a background of such. Now that character has an important thing, and he's going to be a lot more involved. So that gives you a way for the player to be bought into the game, and equally so, you can find a way for everyone to do that. Similarly, so if you apply in low fantasy, there are again easier ways where you can bring in a sort of medieval feel of you're all coming from different various backgrounds, but you might all congregate around the tavern, because nothing destroys the barriers of social classes than alcohol, because
Absolutely.
we all want to get drunk. So.
I mean, I know people push back against the tavern as being a starting point,
So,
But as a Brit, I still remember life, even when I turned 18 in the late 80s, early 90s. The pub was where you met your friends. There wasn't the internet. Phone calls were still quite expensive. There were no mobile phones. You would arrange to meet your mates at the pub on a Friday night, Saturday night, or whatever, at 7 o'clock or whatever, and you'd all drink together, lose your inhibitions together, and just talk nonsense for 4 or 5 hours, however long. But that was the bonding, and that was where we shared our stories of the week, our ups and downs, and that's how we kept our friends. And something I've noticed since the pub has less become a focal point of my general life is struggling to keep in touch with those people who I would meet through the pub. I think it's having that central glue is important, and I like that transferred into a D&D game. And people complain about the adventures starting in pubs. No, it's a perfect place. It's a perfect place to start the vast majority of adventures. That's where stories are told. That's where people come together. That's where you find out about the latest news. That's where the gossiping happens. That's where the rumors spread. It's a good place to start.
well, yes. So just working it based on that. Because again, like you said, it is the place where you are going to be having the gossip. So it's a social thing, not just for, again, for you and your friends, but it's literally people come there. Husbands, wives, the whole 9 yards. They're all going to be there. There's going to be dice gambling. There's going to be activities, and if there's a festive going on, again, there's going to be things that people are going to be doing. And surprise, surprise, if you live in a small town, you get bored.
Yeah.
You need somewhere to go. It's so much better for you to have a centralized place like the tavern than having the young kids going off into the woods going, "Ooh, let's go and hit each other with sticks. Oh no, wolves! Shit!" And then, now you've got to send out search parties, and now they get attacked by goblins. It is safer just for the people to drink. Can't believe I'm promoting this, but in Fantasyland, make your peasants drink. It's so much better for the economy. It's so much better for your fiefdom.
They're much more tractable that way.
And it's better for their health.
Yeah, exactly.
Than water that may or may not be contaminated.
Pish posh. You'll get an iron stomach.
Oh yeah, ancient Egypt, you couldn't drink the water. You had to drink beer.
Yeah.
It made all your little aches and pains go away. The slaves slept well at night, and they worked hard the next day till they were crushed by big blocks of rock.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like right now, like just the ideas we're having rolling here, that's just all based on us just going like, okay, there's no magic, there's none of this. Like, what would life be like? Right there, that's a great buy-in for a team, for a group of players. Like, okay, what are we going to do? And you can turn this around and go like, okay, well, use the proficiencies and turn around and go like, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a cobbler. Oh, great. So you work on all the shoes. So you come from this family trade. And like, you then turn around. It's like, well, which family do you come from? It's like, well, I think I'll just be a farmer. It's like, great. Everyone needs a farmer. You've got a little plot of land. You produce food. You make money from this. So on and so on. Now it's not just, oh, I am Sir Wilkinson Byron the third of blah, blah, blah. But it's now there's a lot more investment, and it becomes about the players and the community that they're originating from. So that's my take on it. That's how I would sort of roll it out and get the players to buy into it.
I mean, I get the impression, Halakar, that certainly your game has begun quite low fantasy, low magic, where all your players have started up as level 0. They're brought together as friends in a town, reluctant heroes.
And there is some magic. I mean, there's the mayor is a 3rd level magic user. The head of the local church, which is I'm drawing a blank on the goddess now, but the Greyhawk goddess of rivers and lakes is a 2nd level cleric. The innkeeper is a retired 3rd level thief, and there's a couple 1st and 2nd level fighters that actually the thief, the ranger, and the fighter, who was the blacksmith, all had adventured together in the past, and they came back because 2 of them had women they had planned on marrying in this town. Well, that was part of what brought those 3 families to the town. I did somewhat of a history on the whole village itself. So there's a trinket here and there, like one of them has a magic dagger, and there's a +1 longsword in town, but it's not like, man, if you read through some of the Forgotten Realms books, when they detail a town, every other person you look at is a 10th level something or another with 3 wall lockers full of magical gear.
Yeah, again, is everything is quite low level. It's quite grounded. A lot of you've put a lot of effort into those small details that make the town feel authentic. And I think that's key for a generally sort of low powered, low magic, low fantasy style, at least a beginning of a campaign.
Yeah, and the mayor walks around. His memorized spells are like the dry and mend cantrips and light. Nothing offensive, and almost nothing defensive, really. Not comprehend languages, but yeah, I can't even think.
Read languages.
It might have been from the spell compendium that I got it, but there's a low level. It's not as powerful as tongues, but it lets him. So if a trader comes in with something in one of the caravans with a logbook or whatever, he can read it to make sure that they've paid all their tolls along the way. He doesn't need to report them to the overseer for violating the rules of the road, kind of deal.
Halakar, don't tell me that there's an actual spell that's just a mental calculator.
No. It's just so that he can read the entries in the book.
I was just like, this is amazing. I am finding this. It's a spreadsheet in his mind with spells. I need this spell now.
No, it's a special spell called Read Bad Handwriting.
Yeah, doctor's handwriting.
Yeah, exactly.
Decipher doctor script, yes.
Yeah.
And that's what it might. It's nothing super powerful. It's just an arcane version of the read script that a thief would have at higher levels. But yeah, I mean, nobody there has anything. With the first town combat, a couple of giant ants come up the now partially drained riverbed into town, and everybody panics because these things are armor class 2, and the 6 town guardsmen, 3 of them have clubs and 3 of them have quarterstaves. Yeah. So yeah, the mayor came out and cast a light spell on one of them to confuse it. One of the ranchers lassoed one, and they hog-tied it to a tree and beat it to death as it was immovable. And they basically dogpiled the other one. 6 of them jumped on it and held it immobile until they could rip its legs off. So yeah,
that sounds great. And even then, giant ants just sort of mutated animals, really. Yeah. Then it's not like a chimera or a basilisk or something like that. These are just large insects that have grown somewhat larger than they ought to be. But still, it's keeping things grounded. And for me, the biggest pro I have as a DM running a game that is low magic, low fantasy, is I find it much easier to improvise details of the world, where expectations are closer to what we're familiar with. I find it very difficult to picture in my mind and improvise a large city with great magical academies and laboratories churning out magical gubbins and what have you, and every other NPC is 8th level, 10th level, X hero, whatever. I find it much easier to picture in my mind a little village where maybe only 2 or 3 in the village, like your guardsmen. Then one of them might be lucky enough to have a leather jerkin for armor. They pick up sticks to use as clubs. One of them might just have a spear that his dad passed to him because his dad was in the town militia once.
The 2 spears in town are mounted to the wall in the council chambers behind a unusable shield. So one of the players decided when that happened, he was going to try to get one of those spears off the wall. And it took him, by the time he got one of those spears off and made it back, the fight was over. But he knew that there actually were 2 weapons available in town.
But now he's got a spear. But it gets players into a position where, I mean, it at least postpones that arms race that happens in a lot of fantasy games. Yeah. Players remain grateful for small things they find. And I think it allows players to come up with more creative solutions to problems where they haven't just got something powerful to fall back on. And so players can improvise, in my opinion, a lot better as well. And certainly in a setting where characters are low powered, low magic, not too many special abilities, you get players thinking more about their characters, what their characters' defining traits are, which is what I'm going to bring up now. Elfbait's game, where we've got Slan, your character, who is addicted to gambling.
Yes. So the reason for this was he has a 7 wisdom, so he's very low wisdom, and I wanted to do, it's easy when you say I have a low wisdom, let's just make him do stupid things, all like act in foolish ways all the time. Mm-hmm. But there's other ways to have low wisdom and having some sort of addiction of some sort, but that's not to a physical substance, so it could be, I chose gambling, but it could have been, people who are prone to go towards dangerous situations. They're not necessarily suicidal, but they take unnecessary risks. That's a type of addiction that actually exists in the real world. That could be considered low wisdom too. But I felt gambling could be the more interesting. The fact he's a thief kind of goes well mm-hmm. with that. And I really leaned into it in the first session, and I still do some of it, but it's established that that's what he has, and that whenever he's in a group of people, he will pull out the dice or try to play some other game of chance with whoever's around him.
And so, I mean, my point here is that it is a very low magic setting, and with a limited range of choices in terms of character types, a limited range of races and classes, and a very sort of grounded feel to the world, you've almost certainly been prompted into thinking this sort of thing as a way of differentiating that character, a way of bringing life to that character, making that character feel different. And I think this sort of thing helps. This sort of thing really helps.
Yeah. I think part of it too is that if there's a lot of magic and you're the magic user, then you're the guy who uses magic. And
yes,
you don't need to go much further unless you could, but a lot of people stop there. No, I think all the players in Elfbait's game have come up with interesting characters that are all very distinct.
Brian, for example, his character's very boorish, very sort of he's loud, he imposes his will, he comes across as quite confident, ready for a fight, and he's pushing that sort of character, whereas you you tend to lurk a little bit more and gamble on things all the time. And I bet a copper he's going to say this.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. It's become his within just a couple of sessions. It become his trademark. I'll wager a copper.
Yeah.
So, and I think having that sort of setup for a game really helps the players in terms of coming up with little ideas about characters like this.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly see it more in games that have lower fantasy expectations, lower magic, and a more focused choice of classes and races.
Yeah.
Any input from anyone else around the table?
Well, I thought I'd mention one advantage of a low magic setting in, at least for D&D in purely mechanical game mechanics terms, is that there's this problem of how powerful magic users and clerics can become at high levels when they have a whole bunch of very powerful spells at their disposals, and the fighter can go up, but unless you give him magic, he becomes a lot less powerful. You know, a 10th level fighter with no magic items whatsoever. He's just got, you know, his chainmail or his plate mail. He's got his sword. None of it is magical. He's a lot less powerful than a 10th level magic user in many ways.
Yeah, his sword still only does 1 to 8 versus small and medium creatures.
Yeah, exactly. But that's always been a problem with D&D, and they've tried to resolve it with things like the percentile strength, which gave these insane bonuses. If you had, you know, if you had an 18, whatever, you could get up to like +2, +3 to hit, and +6 damage, or some insane stuff like that. And I think it was a way to sort of like, and because it's reserved only for fighters, it clearly is a way for fighters to be able to keep up a bit with magic users. If you have a low setting, you don't have that worry anymore of, you know, how powerful can my fighters become.
But look at what the fighters can do, which is their multiple attacks. Yes. And if you start bringing in things like the specialization abilities, which again we're not looking at any magical abilities, you're gonna have that in now, allowing them to do.
But I think all of those things were brought in to help the fighters classes keep up with the magic using classes.
Yeah, I think that was the justification for the specialization and double specialization. If I remember some of the talk in Dragon Magazine around the time that Unearthed Arcana came out.
Yeah.
Well, maybe second edition, so that was already baked in. But I know, if I remember correctly, from first edition, as you get to certain levels, you get multiple attacks, and already there, that's going to be very useful. And even again, whenever I hear the whole discussion of like, oh, the wizard's going to be doing more damage than the fighter, yes, if you put them one against the other. But if the fighter is going to be fighting against the wizard, no sane fighter will take them on in a head-on first fight. You're going to be looking at ranged attacks, which again, because of the rules, even with first edition, with multiple attacks at the higher levels, and then you've got multiple attacks, you know, 2 shots with a bow, then you're going to be starting having these sort of attacks towards the wizard. All you've got to do is just beat his what's it called? His
armor class.
His armor class is going to be non-existent. If he's got stone skin, all you got to do is pebble them down, and from there, all you have to do is close the distance by throwing daggers at him, because you're going to be quicker than him if you use speed factors.
Yes.
So it's all about how you approach it. But, sorry, my point is, the fighters, they do have the things, but it's going to be a very niche aspect of the game.
Yeah. The fighter basically only really has a chance if he doesn't give the wizard a chance to prepare.
Yeah.
If the wizard has a chance to prepare, the fighter's in trouble.
Yeah. But it's also a question of, in more large-scale things where the high-level wizard can use things like fireballs and lightning bolts and walls of force and whatnot, which can very much change the course of a large-scale battle, whereas the fighter can only ever fight, you know, one enemy at a time, or, you know, maybe 2 or 3, but you know what I mean.
Yes, but again, I'll take the other side of that argument. Who's going to be holding the gate?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying fighters are useless. I love fighters, you know.
No, I know. I want to bring out the counterpoints. Even in a low fantasy point, like, the fighters are going to be a very crucial thing, because even So at the very beginning, the fight is going to be super crucial. They're in the front, they're fighting everything over, and the natural progression is that they go from being an offensive character to a more defensive character, because at that point, any competent group is going to look at the spellcasters as artillery, and you want to protect your artillery to basically devastate the enemy. By the time they come anywhere close, they are softened up, weak, and demoralized, and the fighters will just walk in and mop it up. But that's where you look at the teamwork, and that's where the good cooperation is going to be coming together. Because a wizard is only going to be casting a maximum 4 fireballs, or if he's not that high level, if he's only level 8, he's going to be 2, 3.
2.
Yeah.
Right. We have. This seems to be quite a popular topic tonight. I knew a few people would be joining late. Before I let them in, I'm just going to say hello to people who have joined chat. Squirrel Hermit, RPG Grandma, Me Do. There's your wrong Elf Bates lurking about. Anybody I've missed? Mac Thompson, who he likes his low magic games. Yes, I'm a bit chilled here. I'm in the attic. There is no heating up here. It is cold. Right. I'm going to sit back and just let conversation develop. Look at this. Hello, fledgling adventurer. IQ.
Hi. I was going to say noob, but I was like, I guess I'm a bit better than that now.
Yeah, but
You're not a noob anymore.
boob, so that works.
And we have a bear as well. And just I did mention earlier, Bear, you are currently running a fairly low fantasy, fairly low magic game for us, aren't you? On a Saturday, it's very much grounded in medieval feudal Europe with a lot of realistic flavor to it.
Well, thank you. That's the goal, so I'm glad that's working out. Yay!
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my God! Never shave again, Iman.
Why? Why does everyone fucking? I thought y'all would be more afraid of me with a beard.
Akbar? No, buddy. I like the beard.
I guess it suits me, but.
Inshallah. Do what you wish. It's your way. It is the will of the world. Anyway, what was your question there?
I'm going to put you straight on the spot, Bear. And
sure.
We're talking about the advantages of running lower magic, lower fantasy games. Mm-hmm. From a DM standpoint, how has it sort of helped you get things set up and get things going?
Well, I don't know how much of an advantage it is versus just a stylistic choice and a flavor. I don't think it's advantageous. I think it's just what it is. I have a preference for it. I don't like high magic. I don't want to be playing Hogwarts. I don't like the principles of Glantry, principalities of Glantry. I don't like magic streetlights and ye old magic shop and all that kind of stuff. I find that just so. Just go play sci-fi. You know what I mean? Go like. It's like people go, I'm really into Star Wars. Just go play fantasy. It's the same damn thing at the end of the day, right? But that's me. I'm like that. I prefer a lower, grittier fantasy. I like stuff where magic doesn't always solve everything. I don't like ubiquitous magic. I like magic to be special. Probably ties into my love of Arthurian legend and Celtic myth and Viking stuff, where the magic meant something, and when it happened, it was like, ooh. I think a wizard on every corner is vulgar. And I think if you're going to go that way, you might as well continue all the way down the road and have ye old cleric of the teeth set up a shop where he does dentistry for people with, cure light wound spells and, take money for it. Because otherwise, look, I don't want to play fantasy in the world I live in, but just everything that is technology here is magic there. So one of the things that drove me is I love the comic Rat Queens. I thought it was great, but I got really annoyed by their magic texting stones and using them like cell phones. And I was just like, dear God, it's just lazy writing. So for me, I don't like that kind of stuff. But if you like it, fill your boots, man. God bless you. Have a good time.
Medu has asked if can we define exactly what low fantasy is. We did about 20 minutes ago, and the general consensus is that low fantasy is generally a world which is much more relatable. Typically, in our games, typically human dominated. There's very little in the way of sort of earth shattering stuff going on. A lot of the adventures are much closer to home, and you're more things like you're more likely to find your enemies are more likely to be a wild bear, a wild boar, other humans, or maybe occasionally shock horror, something more fantastical. But when it happens, it is fantastical. It's not constant hordes of goblins and fire-breathing dragons all the time. It's stuff that we can relate to a lot more easily. I think that defines it, really, doesn't it?
I also like the Grecian aspect of it, of that monsters should be unique. They shouldn't be a wild species living out there in the world and part of the ecosystem. No. They should be something that is horrific and unique. If you fight a Hydra, there shouldn't be 20 Hydras in the world, you know?
No.
Unless it's dragons. Dragons you can do a little bit more with, so, you know.
D&D
can be low. It can be low fantasy. It just depends on which set rules you're using and what house rules you're using.
Yeah. It's easier to do. I think it's easier to do low fantasy with older editions and at lower levels.
Oh, yes.
Once you get to higher level games and newer editions, it's more difficult.
Yeah.
You know, even some of the first edition store-bought modules, though, had, if you look at them, they had quite a bit of magical treasure in it.
Yeah.
A lot of it may not have been usable by your particular party, but there's quite a bit in there.
Yeah, but
there've been times where I have taken things out because it's like, you know, this, for the level this group is, they don't need to have that yet.
No.
One module that you can remove all the magic and yet not lose the essential plot of it is the Secret Assault Marsh. Because you think it's a haunted house, you think there's something supernatural, but it's somebody faking it because they want to cover up their activity. You know, like, all you need to do is remove those few magic items in that module, and you can have a zero magic game and still run that whole module.
Yeah, you mean
it wouldn't be a low fantasy because of the lizard men and the other species of non-humans, but you could always replace those with human groups.
You could have, the illusionists. The illusionist, for example, could be replaced with a bandit doing tricks with a lantern, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
To create the effects.
Have you guys ever read The Ranger's Apprentice?
I haven't, no.
Okay, well, that's a pretty good series, and it is low magic. But they do a whole sequence where they have to go into this forest, and there's supposed to be this giant in the forest, and then they, you know, not to spoil it, but it turns out to be exactly what we're talking about: trickery and magician stuff as opposed to sorcery, right?
One thing I really like about low magic is that things that would otherwise be overlooked or scoffed at or whatever as treasure are now something that might have interest. That's why I shut off the camera there for a second so I could go dig around and pull out some of my game aids. One of the first things my party did, they have, if you do the online games, it was almost like a faction type thing. They basically earn points in several different categories in order to have the adults in town, because they're all teenagers, look at them as something other than kids. And when they completed the first, I don't know, it was a couple months of gaming and actually got to the point where they gained first level, they all, they had a ceremony and they were all given a certificate recognizing them as full adults in the community. So that was part of their treasure. They now have a right to speak up in town council. They now can conduct commerce with outside entities. I mean, it was, you know, things that people would just take for granted in a regular game. That was a milestone for them.
Yeah.
They now don't have to get their parents' permission to do things anymore.
In a low magic game, things like that, things that, say the mundane feels more important, and that is something that many would consider to be quite mundane, but it gives them opportunities.
Yeah, one thing they did, that, you know, there's a whole lot of things going on during the flood, and one of the things they elected to do was to help out at the livery stable, which the the current had washed out the sand underneath the floor. The whole stable started to cant to the side, and that jammed the door. They couldn't get into the stable, and the stable had caught on fire from a lantern that got knocked over, and all the horses were going to burn to death. So they managed to get into the stable and get out and rescue some of the horses. So the grateful stable keeper gave them a pony. My God, that's that and their 20-gallon keg they found that they keep full of water wherever they go are two of the best things that, in their opinion, that they have so far. They slapped together a wagon out of junk they found along the riverbanks after the flood, or not a wagon, it's just a two-wheeled cart. But boy, they take care of the cat's meow when it comes to an adventuring group.
They'd have needed about 100 gold to have bought all that, and that's a year's wages. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it also introduces a new thing with low magic, right? Which is okay. You just raided the dungeon. I hate dungeons, but you just raided the dungeon, and you found 500 gold pieces, 3,000 silver pieces, and 25,000 copper pieces, 18 works of art, blah 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 blah. How are you getting that all home? How are you getting that out of the dungeon? You got no bags of holding. There ain't no portable holes. How are you getting all that out?
Loading barrels onto that cart that Halakar's characters have just,
that pony
just
can
built.
only hold so much.
And then how are you going to pull it out? Because that weighs a lot, right? So it becomes a very different style of play where the characters have to worry about things that magic just makes easy peasy lemon squeezy for them, right? So it's just a whole different beast.
So low magic, low fantasy games, there's a lot more resource management in terms of everyday resources. Don't mean magical resources, don't mean power resources, everyday resources. Like you say, lanterns, means of getting things about, food, water, simple arrows. You've got to make sure you've got a supply of these in low magic games, because you can't just push them out of midair.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Food, man.
Yeah, and every arrow they fire that misses the target has to make the save versus crushing blow or be broken, and pretty soon you got to get more arrows.
Rub it in, Gene. Why don't you rub it in? Rub it in. That was our game on Saturday. Yes. Yes. So, Slan, I've been in the two sessions of Elfbait's games I've watched so far. Is it fair to say there's only been one non-human opponent, and that was a woolly mammoth that you as a group chose to fight?
Well, we were on a barge in the first session, and we were being attacked from the shore, and there was one of the group attacking us was riding a mammoth, and they launched into the river that the barge was floating on. And before it reached us, Vargar managed to shoot an arrow and kill the rider. And at this point, the mammoth, who wasn't being spurred on by his rider, decided, well, I don't have anything against the barge, and I'm just going to go back to shore like a sensible mammoth would. But yeah, so far that was the only non-human opponent we've had in the sessions that you've watched. So
yes, I haven't watched the third one just yet. Don't spoil that one for me.
I'm not saying anything.
I hope everyone in chat is aware of the Saturday night monthly game that Bear is running, which myself and Iman are playing in. Anybody else in chat playing in it? I did see Cody in here earlier.
Speaking of low magic, 3 words that'll trigger Bear: cloud of slumber.
No, it's not that. It's just like, holy crap, was it his go-to spell for everything? I was like, okay, come on. First one, he did thunderclaps and he did fog clouds. I was like, this is interesting. And then it was like, cloud of slumber. Oh, man. But it was okay.
I mean,
it worked.
with Cody's character there, it felt low magic in the first session.
Yeah.
But the second session, because I don't know the magic rules in Palladium.
Yeah.
I'm not playing a magic character. It was nice and simple. But
Yeah, me neither.
Cody is the only character in the party capable of doing anything magical, as far as I know. The rest of the party, myself and Iman, are knights. We have an archer. We have a Friar Tuck monk, and I don't know what class Malachi's character is. Is he just a warrior of some sort?
Malachi is a knight, I believe.
Is he a knight as well?
I believe so. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think so.
He's portraying the knight very differently to the way myself and Iman are portraying.
He might be a soldier. I can't remember what he did in the end.
Okay.
Well, he was a prisoner originally, wasn't he? And we had to free him.
Well, he was okay. So he's an Estradi Templar who turned against his order. And you've met the Estradi Templars, and you've seen what lovely, wonderful, easygoing fellows they are. So clearly, someone who says this is bullshit, they're going to be, you know what, Steve, you made some valid points. Why don't you bring it up at the next meeting? And could you bring some brownies? No, they were going to crucify it. The end of that story. You know what I mean?
But the whole aura of the game is one of low magic. Cody's character, feels very much like an exception. He feels like an oddity in the world.
Well, he is, but that's the point. He sees the larger world that you guys don't get to see, which is why he has that power to open up his third eye and see the magic around him that you guys don't see. Right? That's the point of his character. One of the things I love to do when telling a story like this or running a game like this or writing a comic like this is to start you off as close to normalcy as I can, and then let you as the characters slowly go into this larger, wider, greater world of hidden secrets that you don't normally deal with, but suddenly you're having to deal with. And as a result of that, now you're having to cope with it. Well, Cody is your guide to this larger world. Hey, Eli.
Hello. How's it going?
So, did Eli just interrupt you mid-flow there, Bear?
No, I'm good.
I mean, I didn't say anything.
You didn't say a damn thing. I finished my point and then said hi to Eli. There is one person I wish was playing in this game, and it's Sax. And the reason why is because I have an entire culture just perfect for Sax that I wish he was playing in one of my games because he would bring that culture to life for me.
Sorry.
Red Dawn says here, I guess no one here plays D&D and moved on to other fantasy games. Well, yeah, I think we all have. I think most of us started with D&D and have moved on to other things. Some of us have gone back to D&D or still go back to D&D from time to time. But I think we've dipped our toes in a variety of things. At least most of us, I believe, have.
I mean, I'm currently running 3 D&D games a month, but 2 weekly and 1 monthly D&D games.
Yeah, I'm in 3 different D&D games of each one a different edition right now.
Yeah.
I'm currently running no D&D, but D&D is like that side chick that I every now and then I do a booty call with. It just happens.
I've never been.
And then like that relationship, eventually I remember why it's toxic and we don't get along, and I move back out. You know,
I'm currently running OSE. I'm currently running OSE in Call of Cthulhu and playing in OSE, Palladium Fantasy, and I'm running MERP as well with Lurth. So yeah, a nice variety. So Eli, one of the reasons I've got this topic is it's due to yourself and Bear's currently streamed games. I haven't caught the 3rd episode yet. Slan hasn't given me any spoilers as to what's happened yet, but it's fair to say that you're running it's OSE, which for those who don't know is Moldvay basic D&D, just organized very neatly, but you've stripped out pretty much all the magic, and you're running it. It feels like a very low fantasy, very low magic, very gritty, very sort of. Tell us about your game. I mean,
so it's OSE, and hopefully I'm coming across okay with my desk mic and not my headphones. It's heavily seasoned with the genre rules for the AD&D Conan modules. which, whether or not you like those modules or not, they had some great rules for making D&D play like the Conan world. So I pulled out all of the blatantly magic casty classes and replaced them with a wider variety of fighting type classes. But also I have the mage, which is an OSE alternate class, which is a low magic wizard. All the magic stuff he can do comes down to thief skill style percentage rolls. Except for he can heal 1 hit point per level per day. Which, I mean, in OSC is actually not a bad amount of hit points to be able to heal, regardless, because once he gets to 3rd level, 3. But he can also
flavor that. You can flavor that as binding wounds because it is quite. It's
or even low magic healing for that matter. Yeah. It's just not or herbalism or whatever. We're gonna go get some freaking king foil or whatever. King's fur.
It's a weed.
But no, and that class is also good for every flavor of Conan style low level magic-y person, whether it's an acolyte or a cultist or some sort of hedge wizard or a shaman. They all fit into that because he can still cast magic. He just has to cast it from prepared scrolls, which he has the ability to prepare, and you can flavor that as charms or totems or whatever your culture is. It's very fits that the style of like Mako from the Conan the Barbarian movie. That character was very much what the mage class. So now that said, there is magic in my world, but it's just out there in rare but powerful doses, and usually it's not healthy for you, even the people who wield it. So there are actual wizards in the world. They just haven't appeared yet.
I bet you magic doesn't really exist.
What was that?
I bet you magic doesn't really exist.
In a bit of silver.
It's a red herring.
Yeah.
But no. So far, it's been men. Men are the hazards they've had to deal with.
And the mammoth
beings, and there are more fantastical things out there. I think low fantasy is kind of hard to define. This is definitely not it's a rare magic setting. I wouldn't say it's a low magic setting because there's potentially world-breaking magic in it, just like there is in Conan and stuff like that.
I mean, low magic can have pockets of magic. It's just not on every street corner like the.
Oh no, it's they haven't run into anybody who has magic. The closest they've come is Igor had some creepy red-robed cultist or pilgrim or something at the gates of the city brush their hand against his hand and whisper, "A dead god sleeps in your land," or something to that. A god sleeps in your land, and that was it. And that could just be some lunatic hopped up on Lotus. So
hopped up on the goofballs.
Exactly.
Just going to come back to D&D has 50 years of evolution of the game.
50 years of evolution.
Not all evolution is good. Not all evolution is bad. And not everybody likes every bit of the way things have evolved along the way. 5th edition has become very popular, partly because of the culture at the moment, in that nerd culture is popular, and 5th edition is very accessible. We've got online, you've got YouTube with all the live plays and what have you. I think most of us here, I think a lot of us here have wrestled with 5th edition somewhat.
Yeah.
Burn it with fire.
I put it in a submission lock and made it my bitch.
I know Saxius currently still runs it. I currently still play in a 5th. I still play in a 5th edition variant game.
I don't run 5th edition anymore.
I don't run 5th edition anymore. I know Eli has tried to run a lot of 5th edition recently, and I know we've talked about your issues that you've had with it in terms of working with it as a system. And I just think in general, we tend to like things which give us a little more freedom. For me, it feels quite mechanical. The characters are very much planned through the levels, not as much as 3rd edition, but we tend to more test the players rather than test the character approach, which older versions of the games tend to have. Bear's different here because Bear likes his superhero games.
I don't live in that club. Sorry.
No, Bear's different. Bear's an outlier there a little bit, I think.
I mean, I feel like 5th edition has a solid core system, and you can see that demonstrated in games that take that system and turn it into something else.
Yep.
If you pull back on the other window dressing around the core system, it's still good. Low Fantasy Gaming does that. Was it the One Ring did that? I think it is, or no, Middle Earth Adventures does that. Shadow the Demon Lord is basically 5th edition.
Yeah, Symbaroum, the Symbaroum 5e version is also dialing it back a lot.
So you can make 5th edition to whatever rhythm you want. You just have to pick the rule system.
If I may, so the core system of 5e is an excellent engine. It works very well. It's very efficient, and it plays really well. All the add-ons, like you call the window dressings, all the execution of 5e under WotC's watch has been just, for me, not something I like. Now, you can dial a lot of it back, but it's like I love to say, one of my favorite quotes from Buckaroo Banzai, which is, oh, no, don't tug on that. You never know what it's connected to. And that's one of the problems with 5e is that it is so intricately designed that when you start removing stuff, you might be breaking parts of the system. So for me, my go-to if I'm going to run 5e is to grab the starter set, the SRD, the basic rules, and build myself out from there as opposed to using their stuff. You know what I mean? Add what I want to add. And then I'm less likely to break the system. At the end of the day, though, I'm having way more fun playing Palladium Fantasy.
Yeah. Low Fantasy Gaming did a really good job of taking the 5th edition engine and basically took all the innovations that 5e brought in and wrote an old school style game using modern innovations, ascending armor class, a D20 advantage disadvantage based system. But then their classes cap out at level 10.
Yeah.
You have abilities that you get as you level up, but they're not defined by the rules. They give them some examples, but they encourage the DM and the players to sit together and come up with those little incremental things that will make two fighters vary from one another as they go along. It's got a luck mechanic that that's basically all the saves are based on your luck. You've got a whole bunch of other stuff that's all built on the 5th edition engine. So
now to bring it back on topic before Sax just murders us with the Sax Act.
Here's where I drag it back to topic with my general opinion of 5th edition, in that characters become too magical, too powerful, too quickly. And thus it lends itself very much towards the very high magic, very high fantasy style gaming, which is the direct opposite of the topic we're discussing tonight.
But if you go into the DMG, there are some excellent optional rules to make it grittier and lower magic and more realistic of a game. If you just fudge the experience tables, you can slow down the progression as quickly as possible. You can even get rid of subclasses and run it with just your basic 4 and play that game forever. There's lots of options with it, but that's the thing. You have to do the work to get it done. Unlike an OSC where you just grab it and run it out of the book and you're pretty much good to go,
Yes. There we go. And yes, 5e is solid. There's some good stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but try getting the players to accept them.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Yes.
If you're accumulating players from the general pool of 5e players out there, they're going to come to the table with certain expectations of what the game is going to be, and that's a fair cop. You know, if somebody tells me I'm going to play 5th edition, I have
preconceived notion.
I have an expectation set that it's going to be this. If somebody tells me we're going to play second edition AD&D, I know what it is as well. So
if you want low magic, perilous, low fantasy sort of gaming, there are better systems than 5th edition.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, where were we? So, a question I have asked to various people, I don't know if you heard earlier, is so the advantages of running a low magic, low fantasy game, Eli, in terms of getting your game running, in terms of developing your game, in terms of developing your world and things like that.
First of all, I think the easiest thing is you honestly just have to worry about how humans work. You don't have to worry about okay, I have to come up with elf cultures, I have to come up with dwarf cultures, and also I keep in mind I'm playing a very stylized version of it too. I'm very much doing that sword and sorcery, Howard, Lieber kind of sort of a world, and so for mine, I've doing the tried and true. I've got my earth culture analogs that I put in there. Very much focus. It gives me also I can focus on developing a sense of place and environment. One of the few of the comments I've had from the players is that I set up, and I don't, maybe Grumpy can agree or disagree here because he's one of them, that I set up. They've said that it's really easy for them to kind of feel where they're at, like what the world is like, what the world's like.
It's easier to improvise. I think it's easier to develop a personality for your character as well, when you've got less to work with. So I'm finding in your game, Bear, because I'm playing a human knight, it's very relatable, and because his background is quite authentic. Again, it's very relatable. Yeah. You mentioned something about me taking little nuggets and spinning them out. Yeah, it's easy for me to do because I'm going to use the word relatable again. The setting, the people we meet, the other members of the party. It's easy to improvise and run with these little nuggets. Yeah, because I've got no fear of derailing things. That's
one thing I said to John yesterday about your session, Bear, is everyone. Well, I got voted MVP, right? Which again, I'm very thankful for. But everyone voted it because of that conversation I had with my father, right? Yeah. And you role played him in the way that not only that I expected you to, but that I wanted you to, so I could bounce off it in the way that I did, basically. Yeah. So everyone was saying that I role played really well, but it's because you did what you did that I was able to do what I did.
Well, it's not a tap dance; it's a tango.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So we're dancing together in that one. So my role playing, your role playing work together to make the scene good. Just like any of the players role playing together makes the scene good. Like Hungar picking on the old geeks on Sir Devere with his, Sir Rusty and
armor,
all this stuff. And then John, instead of getting annoyed by it, played it, took it, and made his character dance it. And as a result, it created a little trope for the night that was very entertaining for everybody. Right.
You see that in my game too.
Yeah, and that's what role playing is. And that's something that I think when you can focus on the characters, again, I disagree with this, you're testing the player nonsense. When you can focus on the characters without worrying so much about what the character can do as to what's happening to the character, role playing will come from that. Because they're not worried about, well, hang on, I have a reaction left and I have a bonus action and then I've already used this spell 3 times. No, they're in the moment. They're not worried about what the character's abilities are. They're worried about what the character's event is. And I think that's where you get the role playing from.
It's easier to do that, though. I'm going to use the relatable word again. It's easier to do that when everything feels relatable and grounded. And that's
I think that's the thing. I wasn't role playing character. I was role playing the scene that my character was in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I role played that bit differently to how I role play when I'm talking to Sir Devere, for example.
Well, because the character's multifaceted for you. They're alive now, right? And by not having rules get in the way of that, you're able to just sort of dive in and immerse yourself in the character, which is really good. It's really nice. But as I've said many times to other people, there's the other side of it, which is it's still a game, and there are still mechanics, and you still need to pay attention to them. Don't lose one for obsession with the other. Don't lose the role playing because you're so obsessed with the rules, and don't lose the rules because you're so obsessed with the role playing. Find the middle path. I know, I swear to God, I always talk about how I find the middle, and I'm always looking for the middle, but that's who I am. I probably should have been a Buddhist, because I believe in the middle way. I believe there's good on both sides and bad on both sides. Pick the stuff that's good, ignore the stuff that's bad, and move forward, and you'll have great games.
Yeah,
and Strax also needs to play. And Eli needs to play sometime as an NPC guest as the first time you guys meet a real elf.
Eli, we interrupted you. You were gonna say you were gonna.
Oh no, trying to find an entry point. So the minimal characters that you get with low fantasy games too, I think and of course that's going to vary based on system. Palladium has still got a pretty heavy character sheet. Even though it's you're running a low fantasy setting, just because of the nature of the system. But I feel like when you're not worrying about, like Bear was saying, reactions, bonus actions, things like that, and a lot of bells and whistles on your sheet, your players are going to role play in their actions as well, not just in their character interactions, but their actions. I don't want to spoil anything for you, John, but there's a particular scene in the third session of my game where somebody does something that's clearly not in the rules, and we on the spot come up with some die modifier mechanics, and it's played out, and it ends up being really fun, because they don't have to worry about looking at their sheet and going, is this an action or a bonus action or a reaction? It's just like, I want to do a thing. Okay, cool. Roll this for me, and you can just, wing it, and it just makes a much more, lively and real, believable setting and game. But it's still a game, so we can come up with those mechanics on it real quick. Yeah.
But there you go. See, so this is the thing. With a game system like that, you can just say, give me a roll, we'll do it real quick. And I do that in almost every game I run. I don't worry about what the actual rule is, because I know it's not going to break anything to say, just give me a roll against your strength, give me a roll against your endurance, whatever. When you get to the 5e level of gaming, you run into that problem. Again, if don't tug on that, you never know what it's attached to. Well, just give me that. But I have a thing, and I have a defeat, and I have this class ability, and I have this other thing, and all these things combined to give me a this and a that. And it's like, oh, dear God.
Yeah, I mean, as a GM in 5e, if you allow a concession to a player to, like you said, pull on that thread, for next thing you know, you've fallen into his trap. And he's laying out this chain of 6 different things, like a combo in Magic the Gathering.
I see you've had someone play a 5e rogue in your games, have you? Yeah.
I'm going to do this, but that means I have this. Yeah, and thusly I can do this. And it's Tuesday under the full moon. And I can do this.
Guard, turn, parry.
On a month with an R in it.
On a month with a weekday ending in Y.
It's still not as bad as 3rd edition, where one of my players in my game had a armor class flowchart tree because he had so many different feats that kicked in under certain. Are we fighting in a forest? Is it are we fighting with a crowd of people? Are we?
I respect this man. I have deep respect for this man.
Oh, this is my buddy Derek, who I keep talking about. You two need to become pen pals. You'll become spreadsheet pals. I can see you sending spreadsheets back and forth.
Yes, I would fight that man. Straw Piglet, you have asked if you could play an intelligent boar in a low fantasy game. I would say yes, I would allow it, as long as you accept the fact that in an authentically feeling low fantasy game, you're dinner.
Gonna be a lot of people saying burn it.
Yeah, I mean,
You're dinner.
You want to play a lycanthrope or something that is cursed. Be prepared for that affliction to be pretty gnarly. I mean, it's just not going to be just a simple I've got powers. You're going to have to suffer for it too.
Yeah.
You're going to be ducked in ponds and accused of being a witch polymorphed into a beast and all that sort of thing, aren't you?
And depending on the terms, be prepared for your character to become an NPC at least once a month.
Why are you being so mean to why is everybody so mean to my drow character? Because you're a fucking drow.
Oh
Yeah,
You're like
yes.
universally known as evil. Like,
Remember,
but I'm not. Yeah, well, they don't know that.
My youngest wanted to play a tiefling in one of the campaigns I was running that was done as a pretty gritty, low fantasy setting. I'm like, all right, you can play a tiefling. It was like one of their first times playing D&D, and I'm kind of a let the Wookiee win sort of a person and let them indulge, right? I'm like, you have to understand, there's no race of tieflings in this world. You're an oddity. You look like a devil. People are going to think you're the devil when you walk in. So that care, but bless my child. Also been role playing since they were 3, so they're like every time they went into town, face wrapped in a scarf, head under a cloak, so their horns, big voluminous cloak, so that it didn't look like their horns were out of place, and nobody could see their colored skin. Wearing gloves. Bundled up like the Invisible Man every time they went into town, and the running gag was they have an affliction. Don't get too close. That way, nobody would actually get too close and notice that there's purple skin behind in the little eye vent.
As long as the player is willing to lean into that and roll with it.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, we had somebody's girlfriend in our group that they absolutely had to play a tiefling when they first showed up sometime in late 2nd edition, and it's like at that point, I was playing a paladin, and it's like, how I am. You can play a tiefling in this party, but if you even look like you're moving towards neutral, I will kill you. And I will feel very good about it. Because I'm doing what a paladin should do.
If anyone in chat is intrigued by this talk of both Bears and Elfbait's games, I've been a studious host tonight, and I've put links to their channels in the blurb. So not during this stream, but afterwards, if you'd like to go to Bears, the Society of Role-Playing Gamers, or Elfbait's Elfbait channel, you can catch up on both of these games and see how these gentlemen do it, and see how a number of us here in this panel are playing in those games, because they're good. They're good games. They're fun.
Thank you.
GM Cody has a good game too. We just didn't get to play on Sunday.
Oh, he's also got a Palladium game that's really good too that I'm playing in tomorrow.
He's got that 2E game that we run on alternating Sundays. That's where I play my halfling character.
I haven't yet streamed a game with me.
Iman had the most apparently had the most unflattering camera freeze.
Yeah. All right, let's take a screenshot.
He's just resting his eyes.
For a very long time.
It's a long rest.
First I looked up there and did he fall asleep? And then I'm like, no, he's not.
No. Did it do it again?
I will say low fantasy games do require good players, though. Because there's not as many bells and whistles in the world for them to play with. You have to have people who are willing to play with what's there. People who like a limited palette, you certainly want to have them available. And
you have to really lean into the environment a lot more. Think about what's around you. As you say, you can't fall back on conjuring things up. You can't fall back on the superhero powers. You've got to think about, there's a table here. Can I use it? Barrels, cover.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff's got to be in your mind when you're playing a low fantasy game, because this is where I think about testing the players ahead of the characters. This is testing the players' ingenuity, testing the players' attention to detail, and testing the players' imagination when
and their discretion.
In terms of using the world, rather than relying on their characters to have powers to pull them out of everything. So I don't know if we've got the wires crossed a little bit there on that one. There.
I think when you're setting up a low fantasy game, though, you as a GM, you want to try to lean into what you do have left. One of the things I did when I set mine up is I knew I was peeling out a lot of potential class, and obviously I was peeling out like almost all the races and some class options, so I fed back into it with extra class options. Like I've got the barbarian, I've got the berserker, I've got the mage replaced the wizard. I got a warden who replaces the ranger, but I also put in a couple of, and you can work some demi-humans in there without ruining your setting. Like I have in there, I've used the Gargantua and the feral halflings that are available for BX, but I've reskinned them as other races of men in that kind of Hyborian style, alternate races of man kind of an effect. Hyboria, everybody's basically humans out there except for snake people. But, you've got the Picts are often depicted as a very almost orcish type of a culture, even though they're people. And that's the same thing in my game. So nobody's playing any of those, but it does. You can feed some of that player option back in there by taking advantage of some of those alternate classes, variant classes, but also I think archetypical things like nationalities. And Bear does this to a good. I've watched in the games I've watched him run. Where somebody's from and how they sound and how they behave is a big deal in those settings. And so my players, for example, as they've been going through, I'll be like, and you see the group of Caravosans in the corner of the inn. They're playing some gambling game involving daggers and and you're just going to lean into the cultures of your world, and that gives the texture that's kind of peeled out by pulling out all that fantasy and maybe even limiting some of the class and race options that you would normally have in a game. Because now, if you're just dealing with say Hyboria, I'm a Cimmerian, I'm a Vanir, I'm a I'm a Stygian, and you play to that as opposed to I'm an elf, I'm a dwarf, I'm a halfling.
Yeah. But I do that even with my non-human races, right? Depending where they're from, the dwarves are all very different from each other, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like each dwarven hall is like a dwarven society where they have different sort of behaviors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Say thanks, Saxius. I was listening to Elfbait and I didn't see the message saying that he had to go, but thank you for joining us tonight, Saxius. He has work. Frequently has work. But yes, one thing that certainly in Bear's world is you're bringing out the human versus human culture clashes and xenophobia and differences in religion, and differences in views on how the world should be. I think is a good way of describing it. Certainly, there are cultures that we've already encountered who are really not very tolerant of anybody else.
Well, but then there's cultures like your own, right? You're playing a Palabrian, and Palabrians are the laughing stock of the island, right? Like of the Pendric realms or the Albana, the Albani people. The Palabrians are like just one step above the Kalethi in getting jokes made about them all the time because of the nonsense that they've gotten themselves involved with, all of these attempts they've had that have failed to become this massive, important kingdom, and their perceived ownership by the Oscasian merchants. The rest of the country is just going to go, yeah, it's a Palabrian, whatever, moving beyond your means at all times. And then you add to that your character's nobility was essentially purchased. So even with within your own culture, you get no respect. You know what I mean? So it's a really interesting thing. And then as a result, your character is obsessed. And I love that you're doing this with being really, really respectable and really, really, really treated seriously and really, really,
and of the correct breeding.
I'm a noble, damn it.
That's
honest I am.
Where are you from? I'm from Baldur's Gate. Oh, okay. I'm from the Moonsea. Okay. Like that. World building matters. And when people who say, "Oh, I don't care for that. I don't need that. I don't want to read your world background." Okay, great. But you're not the kind of player that's going to have fun in my game anyway, because all of that stuff matters in my game. So if you're not the kind of person that's going to enjoy it, best that we don't play together, and there's no harm, no foul.
Yeah, I know in my game, Grumpy and two of the other characters are all Frost Barbarians, the Northmen, and that gives them basically a very swingy reputation when dealing with people because they're either looked on as raiders or traitors. Like,
Yeah.
They're either, are you going to sell me something or steal my shit? Because that's their reputation in the region they're in. And then we've got Brian is playing a Kurok, which are kind of dirty mud bog dwelling, like island, like British Islanders before the Celts came kind of guys. And then we've got one character who is Vantican, and I think that's Lacaldo, I think, is the mage in the group. He's the only guy nobody is actually of the prevailing controlling people. Like, nobody made an Arturian character. That was going to be Bear was going to have an Arturian guy. So everybody is like technically in a land where they're on the outs. It just happens to be a trade city. And they're all mercenaries, kind of in the off season. That's how we kicked off the campaign. Fighting's done for the winter. Now you got to figure out another way to pay your room and board.
Squirrel Hermit said earlier that dwarves should be Yiddish or Hebrew, and he should definitely check out My World Done, because the mountain dwarves are German and the hill dwarves, well, I tell you, all day we work hard, we do what we want to do. I bring home the gold, she wants diamonds. I bring home the jewels, she wants pearls. I cannot please this woman. This is the thing, and I took that because of Tolkien created the dwarves of Middle Earth to represent the diaspora of the Jews, right? The idea that they're not the culture they once were and they're just wandering the world as a group. So I took that because I got so fucking tired of Scottish dwarves. I had Scottish dwarves up to here. You know what I mean? I was done with it. So I changed it up, and that's the thing. You can do that. And when you have touches like that in your world, it gives relation points for the players to be able to get an idea of the culture, to get an idea of the people, that allow them to form role-playing opinions. And that's a fun thing. And that's why our lore magic makes that so important, because you're not worried about whether or not they're shooting fireballs at let's be honest. Let's just be honest. Standard 5e world, castles. Why do they exist?
Oh, yeah.
Why do castles exist? Why would this culture ever develop castles? Because wizards could just blow up the walls, dragons could just fly over top and fly. They would develop an entire different style of architecture to survive in the world they're in. You know what I mean? So then you got to get into the magic escalation. Well, then I have a prismatic sphere of anti-magic, and Jesus Christ, fuck that. Hey,
that's an issue that's been recognized ages ago. There's an old classic Dragon magazine article on fantasy castles and how they would be built in world where all that stuff exists. That's the whole Eberron campaign. Is what does a fantasy world look like when you have high level magic? You end up with mass transit systems and and skyscrapers.
Yeah.
Not
Have
sure
you guys
my
ever
bot
read?
is
I know
ready
it's an adult comic, but have you ever read Bill Willingham's Ironwood?
Yes.
Yep.
So Ironwood was this setting that he created in the Elementals comics of a magical realm, and then eventually he did an adult comic, which it's still a good story despite the sex. And now there's a role playing game that's out of print that has the world, but they have things like giant snail expresses that are like the snail comes through at 4 p.m. and they've got a carriage hooked up to this giant snail that's like a transit system and stuff like that. And that's where you logically have to go with these types of things if you're going to try and even remotely be realistic about it. So your only other choice is to not care and just play the game, or care and make a world that makes sense. It's up to you.
But
low magic makes sense. High magic, absolute absurdity.
If you have a ton of magic in your world, the magic will start to be regulated also. It'll start to be used for everyday stuff, but then you'll have all these rules about, you cast a light spell and you're not part of such and such a guild, or you have not paid your dues to this, and now you're getting fined or whatever,
You paid your dues, Jack.
Wizards Guild. Get out of here. This is local 520's casting zone.
Yeah.
This is a local guild for local people. One thing I'm going to come back to. I want to come back to is something we sort of hinted at earlier, and certainly Magic touches on this as well. When you've got low fantasy, low magic, what you're saying, for example, in Eli's world, he says he's got pockets of strong magic. That magic will feel all the stronger for it being scarce in the world. When you've got low fantasy, the fantasy will hit much, much harder when it happens because it's not happening all the time. Bear said something about having unique monsters. The Hydra, Medusa, named creatures. They've got so much more impetus in the game when it's not 3 Hydras, 5 Medusas, whatever. It is the Medusa. It has gravitas and horror to it.
Yeah, and even if they're not unique, but they're still extremely rare. Also, by the nature of having low magic, they're going to be much tougher. So my group, for example, even though they have a mage in their group, right now he's not worth shit in a fight. He's using a bow. You know?
Yeah. With a -5.
I know we haven't gotten to the high level modules yet, but have you ever looked through? I believe it's H4 of the Bloodstone series. Yeah. I think I forward stunned him there with that one. But yeah, there's a room that is full of Tarask. There's not a Tarask. There's like a room full of them.
Yeah. One thing that's one of the rules I'm using in mine, this is talking about flavoring your low magic, low fantasy settings, is I'm using the fear check rules from the Conan modules, where basically any sort of incredibly crazy creature, whether that's anything that's outside the normal, so like a giant snake, undead, anything that's not a regular mundane animal has a fear factor to it, and then there's a fear check that players have to make when they get close to those. Also counted amongst that is any open display of magic. Any open display of magic, you have to make a fear check, and if you don't pass it, you're paralyzed for a round, because it's to simulate that oh my god, it's a giant freaking crocodile, or it's a serpent with the head of a man that then has like snakes for hair, and
Well, I mean, one thing I'm mulling over in my head at the moment regarding Bear's game is that Cody's character has started using magic, but at the moment my character's been unconscious when most of it has happened, but I'm still wondering in my head how I'm going to have the character react when he openly sees Cody's character using magic.
Well, one of the things I did for my campaign was I answered my 62 questions about your campaign world that I found online. And I decided, you know what, let's answer those questions. And one of the questions you get in there is, how is magic viewed in your world? And I'm just going to open the document real fast so I can read you exactly what I wrote, because I think it's important, because this would be affecting your character or any other character who's not a magic user in the game, or someone who contributes with or partakes of magic. And I'm sorry, my computer is slow. Oh my God, what's going on? I fucking need a new computer. Don't even get me started on how badly I need a new computer. I'm not even going to talk about it. So, how is magic seen in your world? Sorry,
is Daniel asleep, by the way?
Probably.
Back up.
Probably.
Oh, Dan, hey man, how's it going?
Sorry, I wake up at 4:30, so I tend to,
Yeah.
No, wait, I was wrong. Hang on. You can talk about other things while I'm looking up. It's going to take me a moment to find it. I got to scroll.
I'm actually trying to mull over now. Was I actually there when Cody's character used Cloud of Slumber?
Well, I want to ask you a more important question.
No.
When Malachi's
No, you
character
guys-
saw the dwarf, nobody else did. When you guys took Malachi shopping for weapons, nobody else saw that dwarf.
Oh, the one that tugged on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that matter, right? Like little things like that matter because the thing. How common is magic and where does it come from? Magic is as common as medieval peasants thought it was, which is to say subtle, and a lot of things get blamed on magic. It comes from various sources such as elder beings, fairies, the universe, nature, evil. But it's also dangerous and it causes corruption. And that is how most people think about magic. Yes, it exists. It's subtle and you don't see it. And anything that doesn't work out to your flavor, you can always blame on magic and feel like you're okay with that. And, that's how witch hunts happen.
I mean, in my setting, if somebody's talking about a wizard, they're probably not talking, or a sorcerer, they're probably not talking about it at full volume. Oh, he's a sorcerer, I hear. Pui. Spit and make a sign, sort of thing.
He's in league with Lucifer. Exactly.
Or, see that tower over there? I hear that a wizard lives in it. And he binds demons to him and blah, blah, blah. And, he probably does. But
one good example, and I just thought of it, David Eddings, he had the Belgariad and whatever else. But then he also did a second series. The main character was Sparhawk.
It's the Ruby Throne and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
The Elenium is the name of that series.
Yes, yeah. And I love those books. I love the characters. It was much better than the Belgariad and stuff.
Shut your filthy mouth. Sorry.
That's what she said. That's a good example of low magic, I think. And low fantasy.
So, what about other genres in terms of low fantasy and low magic?
Well, I was actually going to ask you about Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's my cue to go do something else. I'll be here listening.
I can speak to
I
that.
can actually contribute to this.
What would you like to ask me about Call of Cthulhu?
Well, would you consider it to be high or low magic and high and low fantasy?
I consider it to be low magic because most people in the world don't believe magic exists. And when it does exist, it is very difficult to understand. It's corrupting. It drives practitioners insane.
Yeah, it's a dark and dangerous magic setting.
Yeah.
So if you do learn magic, you're not long for the civilized world. In all likelihood, you're going to end up in an asylum.
Don't read books.
Don't read books.
My character had to go to the hospital because he lost too much sanity. So
yeah.
Yes, you've already been to hospital once. You've dropped below half sanity, and you are having self-deletion thoughts now, aren't you?
I would also say it's not only is it low magic, it's also low fantasy. Because, I mean, you're not supposed to be running into oogly booglies all the time.
That's right.
You can, and you might once an adventure, but that's not uncommon in low fantasy settings. I mean, if you go through the Conan books, for example, right, there's a monster in every one of them. There's some monster in nearly every one of those stories. They're still there, and they're still encountered frequently.
I mean, in Call of Cthulhu, 99% of what you meet are people, humans.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the 1% stand out that much more when it does happen.
Yeah, but
so scenario
you're likely going to run into some sort of supernatural critter at least once in adventure, potentially. as they're written.
What's the?
Yeah.
I've seen capitals flying in chat. Sure, Piglet and Manfred are trying to get my attention about something.
What is it?
I don't know. I'm just scroll back up. But yes, the Call of Cthulhu. Yes, I mean, what is happening is potentially earth-shattering, but so much of a session is spent on the mundane aspects of the characters' lives that it's very much a low fantasy feel for vast majority of the time. Yes, it is the definition of low fantasy, in my opinion.
But I think it also goes to show, because I agree with you on the low magic thing, but low magic often means rare magic, but the magic itself can be very powerful.
Yeah, so it's not low magic as such. It's more like a lack of abundance of it.
Well, exactly. It's because it's quite it can be quite powerful. Whereas some people do think of low magic as weak magic, like I can cast a light spell and I can do some cantrips, a man spell, but that's it. I there's no major effects you can achieve with magic, but that's not necessarily low magic. Because low magic can actually sometimes mean rare magic.
Yeah, so John would categorize Call of Cthulhu as low magic, meaning rare magic, because the few instances we've had where weird stuff has happened has been really fucking weird.
Yeah,
but that's the whole point. I mean, we counted up. We're 9 sessions in, 8-9 sessions in, and
that's right.
We play for 3 hours at a time, and roughly 2 hours of every session is spent discussing where you're going to go, discussing what you're going to research, getting yourselves coffee, sitting down, having a chat about what you've been up to.
Meeting NPCs.
Meeting NPCs who are mostly just talking about their daily lives and just wanting to know about you and showing you the sights and that sort of thing. And then you have those just sort of half hour here and there where things get dark and things get horrible. And that makes those dark bits. Or misty, yes. Yes. And in those 9 sessions...
He's doing his voice, guys. He's doing the voice.
In those 9 sessions, I would say you've only met one entity that you really know to be not of humankind.
That's right.
Your mother.
On the flip side, though, that it's also important to remember that in those settings, it's totally okay to have a massive appearance of critters too. Like Call of Cthulhu, you might be dealing with cultists and people all the time, but you also might be trapped in a lighthouse getting overrun by deep ones.
You could be. Yes, you could be.
And just like in Conan, you might run into a couple of incidental undead that come up out of a graveyard, but there's stories with entire armies of the dead in Hyboria as well. Or massive demons and dragons, but it's a matter of pacing and how often you use it. That's the I mean, it's all there still, unless of course it's snakes and apes, because you can use those as much as you want in Conan and nobody will ever notice. But
there was the bit on the weird train with all the dead passengers. Were they human? They were once human. Do they class as human now? They were really zombies, weren't they? But we'll see. We'll see. That's where Manfred lost his first character. Oh, shame. I think one thing as well in low magic and low fantasy, you tend towards fairly high lethality.
Oh yeah.
Because the characters themselves are more grounded and thus are more vulnerable. Look at what happened the first time my character in the Palladium game really had a proper fight. Ouch.
You took a nasty hit.
Yeah, he's a mess, and now he's got to recover from it,
Mm-hmm.
and he can't just wake up. And he can't just wake up the next morning, right as rain, and off he goes being a hero again. He's going to suffer.
Yeah, I
He's going to
forgot
have
to
a scar.
mention, your armor lost
Yep.
a D6 of SDC as well.
It lost a D6 of SDC. Okay.
Yeah, I got to roll that later and give it to you.
Yeah. Okay. Not a problem. Not a
I
problem.
mean, I'm dealing with BX squishies in mine. Even with that, I do have a death and dying mechanic that I found that I like really well. It's instead of tracking negative hit points or anything like that, or instead of being dead right away, because it is a Conan style world, and often death is not the end in Conan. There's getting captured, there's being knocked unconscious, there's being injured. I've got all that in there, but even still, my party's got, some of them have like 4 hit points.
Yeah.
I have,
really good sword
Ace
slash.
Gear has 3.
Ooh,
So
yeah, you're playing
they,
a thief, right?
Oh yeah.
so,
It's a
so they
D4.
fear a mundane dagger. They,
Yeah.
I'm surprised
knife.
they've survived because they've come under arrow fire by masked archers twice. So,
And your character, John, might be a bit more apprehensive about going headfirst into a fight next time.
Of course he will. Of course he will.
And now your armor actually does have a problem with it.
Shh.
but that lethality, it lends to the players doing more than just hitting things with swords. The reason that the players in my game have done as well as they have is because when shit hits the fan, they're not immediately, I pull out my sword and try and kill him. No, half of them are scrambling to do other combat adjacent things to help overall. Like that first fight when they were there on the barge, Ace Gear's running around putting out the
bracers.
torches.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, one of the characters is like picking up his shield and trying to shield the oarsmen, that way that they can keep moving, because, and that's why they survived the fight.
I mean, look what happened in that big combat in Bear's game. You had the three brave warriors striding out to fight these horde of beastmen. You had an archer hiding in the inn, scared for his life, not getting involved.
Yep.
You had
Little peasant boy, bless him.
You had poor Cody running around going, "Oh, let's try and get away from all of this." And you had Hungar asleep, drunk behind the bar. it was, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was.
A good mix of personalities, eh?
Yes. And coming back to my biggest point when it comes to low magic, low fantasy, and all that sort of thing, I feel in low magic, low fantasy games, you get better personalities. You get better characters. As Eli's already said, you get the characters thinking about their environment, reacting to the environment, players being more resourceful. You get players doing something other than just wading in with a sword. You get them thinking about whether they're fighting. Malachi, for example, stood there and thought for about a minute before he stepped forward, and that was great. He was do I? And you could see him in his head. He was do I? And it just makes the game more fun, in my opinion. People like different flavors of game. That's the type of game I like. And
I'm glad I'm delivering.
You could even enjoy multiple flavors of gaming.
You can.
You can do, yes.
It's Baskin Robbins, baby. You go into whatever flavor you like.
Thing where there's this prevailing wisdom that like you can only play like a game or like a style of game. I can enjoy 5th edition. I can enjoy 2E. I can enjoy Marvel Superheroes. I can enjoy Heroes Unlimited. I can enjoy, Star Trek and Star Wars and all of these games, and not feel like one is better than the other or one has to be better than the other. It's we have all this variety. By all means, enjoy it.
All right, I have one exception to that. How can somebody enjoy Star Wars and Star Trek?
I do.
Easy.
This is a
Different
whole
things.
nother episode right there.
I used to, but not anymore because
Yeah.
And
sucks.
Firefly and Space 1999.
Yeah, I mean,
Battlestar
why
Galactica.
can't you enjoy
Yeah.
both of them? It would be my
Both
question.
Battlestar Galactica,
Yay.
great.
I enjoy other styles of game in short doses. I enjoy Marvel superheroes, but I would never play a campaign of it. But I would play it for 3 or 4 sessions just to have a change of pace. I like Paranoia. Yes, it's a sci-fi game, but it's a silly comedy sci-fi game.
Yeah.
But it's a game to be played in short doses as a change of pace. But when it comes to the crunch, when someone says I'm running a campaign, the sort of campaign I will gravitate towards is that low fantasy, low magic one, because it allows me to think about my character more.
Yeah.
And
It's like anything else in life. Food, whatever you like to drink, ice cream, desserts, you're likely going to go back to something more often than others.
yes,
But it doesn't mean you don't want to try those other things now and again. You don't have a
No,
craving.
he doesn't want to try sci-fi. He's opposed to it, even though
Yeah.
we all know,
Well, that's
we
fine.
all know Traveler would be right up his alley.
Evidently, according to John, sci-fi is made out of cheese and milk, but it makes him sick. But no, I have enjoyed too many games in too many different styles to really get hung up on one style of gaming and one type of game or one system. Sometimes I wish I would just have the mindset to commit to one game and one system because it would be a lot cheaper. Probably not, because I just buy a lot more for the one game. But I'd be focused.
but for me, is it true to say that if you really focus on a type of game and become really entrenched in a type of game, does it make you better at playing that type of game or running that type of game than if you spread all your eggs across lots of baskets?
I mean, potentially.
Yeah.
I would say
potentially
it
the
helps with
opposite.
familiarity, but I don't think it necessarily makes you better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I mean-
it can actually have the opposite effect. Whereas, you focus most of your time on a given game, but if you've never tried any other games, you sort of get stuck in this box, in this groove, and you can't get out of it. You don't even realize you're in it. Whereas if you've at least sampled some other games, you can say, "Oh yeah, like could we do
yes, that's
this?"
true.
Or like it might lead you to think of other approaches to whatever problem your character is facing in the game world at that particular time.
I mean, I have sampled other games. As I say, I run Paranoia. I run Call of Cthulhu. I run fantasy games. I run MERP. I run D&D. I've run a lot of 5th edition. I'm currently still playing 5th edition, but it's the Greek themed, ancient Greek themed one. When I quite like the ancient Greek flavor, even though the game, the game system pushes against it, in my opinion. And when I go to conventions, I've sampled a lot of other systems, and yeah, I think sampling them is good.
Yeah.
What I'm on about is focusing on one as your main one, rather than having a third of your time on one game, a third of your time on another game, a third of your time on another game. I certainly think that the more I run Call of Cthulhu, the more adept I get at making it work as I feel it's meant to.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm new to all this, but I can agree. I think the way that you're running it is getting better with each session.
That's just proficiency, but there is a cap. At a certain point, you're not going to be able to get any better at running Call of Cthulhu. You'll just reach that level of proficiency. I know the games that I do run are very likely better for having run other games. Experience with other systems and other mechanics gives your brain tools it needs for dealing with those exceptional situations in any given game that come up. There may not be a rule for that specifically written in the game that you're playing, but you know how it works in another game, and so you can quickly do the math and change it, or even just lift a system, outright.
But I would say, I think the reason why the games are getting better for Call of Cthulhu is as much that the characters are developing as well. The characters are you as players are developing your characters more, and I'm getting used to you as a group more as well. That's true. That's part of the dynamic, I think.
And then also, I think as the story progresses, we all naturally get a bit more invested as well.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah. Which means you react more authentically to the situations I give you. And thus it gives me a better chance to improvise in return and almost predict what you're going to do at certain times, even though you do confuse me at other times.
Well, I think I'm getting better at this is a time where I should ask if I can roll for something. Or look for something.
Well, to be honest, I would rather you didn't ever ask if you could roll for something. I would rather you just said, I would like my character to go and look for this, and I'll call for the roll if need be. So I lean from the other side there.
So know your role.
No, but what I mean is, at least I know I don't just sit there in silence and wait for things to happen. I'm like, oh, this is where I should do something.
Yes. But just tell me what your character's going to do rather than sort of.
I don't know the lingo, mate. Come on.
you're new, but you're new. When you as we know, you are new to gaming, but you've already proved that you're getting somewhere because you got the MVP on Saturday.
I'm still in shock, by the way. I went to bed a happy man.
Good.
Excellent.
Anyway, any other sort of topics regarding low fantasy and low magic games that any of you want to bring up? Because I've really hammered home my main point here in terms of
with my group with the low magic is nobody knows what magic things are when they find them. Well, first of all, in my world, there was a cataclysm 1,000 years ago, so a lot of magic and the ability to make it has been lost. So there are certain spells they will never find, things like that. But when they do find something, it's not like they can cast Identify on it, and it's going to give them what type of magic it is, some indication of how strong it is, but it's not going to be like, oh, well, that's a wand of magic missiles with 36 charges. If they find something, they have to test it out. They have to try to find a sage that might know something about it, like the ring that let them talk to animals was something that was pretty well known in their little village that, from when the veterinarian had it. So the old man in town was able to tell them what he knew about it. There were still some things they had to find out on their own, but, they've got stuff that they have a little bit of idea what it does, and they've tried a few things, but there are a lot of facets of them that they don't know yet. And, they may never find out. But some of the old stuff, they found. I was talking to somebody on the side there. It might have been Straw Piglet or Manfred. They've got like a bag with various little metal pieces and objects in it, and they've tried a couple different things and haven't really gotten it to do anything yet. But when they do, it's nothing earth-shattering, but it's something that will definitely be of use to the party if they can figure it out. But it's not like they can just go to the magic library and look it up in the encyclopedia and say, oh, this is what it is.
I think this is where it boils back down to the key point that the magic feels more magical, feels more mysterious. It's unknown. And that's crucial, in my opinion, to keeping magic enjoyable.
Yeah, well, one thing I've been toying with on and off for a while now is in 5e there's this idea of casting a spell as a ritual which doesn't use a spell slot. I'm not interested in that, but I like the idea of maybe one day running a D&D game or campaign where all spells must be cast as rituals, and what that means is it takes much longer to cast them.
Mm-hmm.
And it means they're, like casting a fireball is something maybe you will have, you're in a siege situation. You'll have your wizard cast a fireball. He'll take maybe an hour or two to be able to cast it. And then, boom, the castle is hit with a fireball, right? And this it basically brings D&D down to a lower magic constraint. So that's one thing I'd be interested in trying at some point. And I need to think about it some more to see how it would work.
Having magic drain the caster or have some inherent risk, that was added to 2nd edition MERP, where spells could attract the attention of the Dark Lord. You don't want that. You really, really don't want that.
No.
No. And it varied from spell to spell and depended on the power. Me Do's got an interesting question here. Why does low fantasy generally have less appeal than high fantasy? I mean, it seems that amongst us, the opposite is true.
Depends on the generation.
In general. But yeah, it is
I agree with
generational.
With what Bear said. Us old fuds, we like more realism, whereas the younger generation, it makes the game easier, for lack of a better word, where you can just do anything with a wave of your fingers and stuff like that, whereas low fantasy, your character and you as a player have to work for what you achieve, rather than looking through a book and saying, oh, I can just do this.
I think a lot of it comes from initial exposure to the game and inspiration. People these days are being inspired by different sources than which inspired a lot of us when we were younger. 2 people want to talk. 3 people want to talk. Hello.
Bear's hand was up first. He goes.
That's fair. Well, yeah, it also depends. I don't think it's anything to do with I want easier. It's what you were brought up on. It's the type of stuff you read as a kid. It's the kind of stuff that was available in your media. We came up with Lord of the Rings. We came up with the darker stuff, Thomas Covenant. We came up with a lot of Conan. We came up with stuff that was way more low magic than it was high magic.
Yeah.
These kids today came up with Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Where it's just magic. So it's what you grew up on. It's the type of fantasy that you came informed with is going to inform your style that you're going to want. At least that's what I think. Eli?
I also think you have to look at part of the reason like older players tend to like the grittier low magic. If we're going with what Guns Are Cool is saying, is that options. That's just what they grew up playing, because there weren't other systems to play.
No, dear God, Halakar. Please punch up Halakar's statement so he can just show you that he's just being a nonsense troll.
I think that back in the day when a lot of us started playing, we didn't have options to go to. Had there been more high fantasy games back in the day, you might have seen more older players into high fantasy.
Yeah.
I would say that there's probably a fair number of people who were interested in playing or interested in higher fantasy who just didn't play games because those games weren't available to them. Or they were playing games that weren't tabletop role-playing games. They might have been playing strategy games or other games that were magical in nature.
I will say that when I was 15, I wanted all the whiz bangs, and I wanted them all now.
Yep.
And I've never had the greatest of attention spans. When I was 15, it wasn't great. But I hate to say it, and I do say it often, I think a little bit of patience and maturity comes into it. I was like this when I was younger. I wanted things now. I wanted things immediately. I wanted all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we get older, we get a little bit more selective.
Says you.
Rather
Yeah.
As I get older, I take what I can get, man.
I'm down to one type of hooker right now. Yeah.
Breathing.
Not
Anyway,
the cheap one.
Hello, Joker. Hello, Joker. You're even newer to these games than Iman is, and you
Which is hard to believe.
You have a sci-fi and superhero sort of comic book background, but you've been dragged into our games, which tend to be quite low magic, not particularly heroic. But you have said, I remember you saying that you tried 5th edition, and
Yes.
you didn't find it very welcoming. But
Well,
coming
I
into
wouldn't say it wasn't welcoming, but like I said, it all depends on the teacher and how they teach it. Because, as you all know, 5th edition have so much overlaying this, overlaying that, spells coming in here and there, and everything else, and you can get a grasp for anything as long as it's taught to you at a decent level.
so you say because we're older and more patient, we're better teachers. Is that what it is?
Old or age is just depends on how willingness you are at simplifying things, even when they're complex as 5e seems to be.
And these older games that we're teaching at the moment, they are simpler, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and also the other thing is with the whole generation thing, like you said when you were younger, you want everything now. Your attention span gets less and less with each generation, which is also where the whole imagination seems to disappear. The generation of these days don't have the imagination that we used to, because the kids these days are not allowed to do half the stuff we got away with.
And it's also because they have technology, so they don't need to use their imagination. When I was a kid, and I'm obviously a fair bit younger than you guys, but even when I was a kid, you had to use your imagination to make shit up and have fun, right?
Well, they're also not allowed to do anything.
But now in this
They are
generation,
not allowed to do anything.
That go outside the great.
And I'm not talking about their parents. I'm talking about society in general. Just doesn't like kids.
That's also true.
I had this conversation with my kids once. I'm like, why aren't you guys out there, doing stuff? Like when I was a kid, they're like, I can't go anywhere without getting yelled at or chased away or told or having the cops threatened on me.
Yeah, go outside and play and don't come back to your clothes and rip.
Well, yeah.
One
time,
where I grew up, we got yelled at all the times. The cops chased us away. We got shopkeepers on the stop hanging out in front of the
we hung out in places we weren't supposed to be and all the time and never had any problems, but varying degrees. I'm sure that even in your situation, Bear, it was probably proportionally different to what they have to deal with now. Where they're
no, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it's like I know kids that are children of my friends who are out there doing stuff. They're making the choice. They're making the decision to go out. And I think that's the difference, is that we were bolder as children. We were much bolder. We were like, I'm going to go see what I can get into trouble doing today.
My kids told me I made them freaks by having them be independent.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. So this is a cultural shift, and it's going to affect things like your style of fantasy you like. It's going to affect the types of movies you want to watch. I read an article just to sort of dovetail it in. This new generation, Z, doesn't like sex in movies. So that's why we're seeing love scenes almost vanish from Hollywood productions, is because they don't like seeing that. It's icky. You know what I mean? Whereas when I was a kid, when I was 14, 15, we were looking like, does this movie have boobs? Like that was yeah.
We were watching Static on Channel 1, hoping we could get a glimpse.
Exactly.
Yeah. First time I watched heavy metal was on a scrambled channel.
First time I watched heavy metal was loud and clear, and I was 10, and my mom knew about it and let me. She let me have my friends over.
I remember. Did you know that show last night? They played the entire Duran Girls on film video. Did you video it?
There are some benefits of having a hippie for a mom.
No, there are some benefits of having negligent parents who gave you a TV and a VCR in the basement and said, "Just get out of our hair."
Dude, that was
That's
all.
all. I mean, I used to go pick up copies of Heavy Metal magazine off the rack when I was like 8 or 9. The guy at the store looked at me. Your mom know you're buying that? Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Yes,
and I
no.
got to keep a 6-pack of Pounders in my desk drawer in the basement with the VCR.
I didn't do that.
I gotta go check on my food.
But no, there are societal differences, cultural differences, and yeah, I think people are right. We grew up in an era when, if you wanted your imagination to be stimulated, you went out and played pretend
Yes.
soldiers,
Yeah.
pretend
Oh,
knights, or you picked up a book and you read it. Now you've got the immediacy. If you want something, everything's just a click away.
It's technology, isn't it?
You can have it now, and yes,
Yep.
I think it does. It does.
The only problem is, because of all that right in front of you, they haven't got the chance of growing up like we did, finding our own entertainment, using our imagination of trying to be somebody else.
That's the thing. The newer generation get bored so easily because they don't know how to actually entertain themselves.
Well, we got bored so easily. So what did we do? Pretend to be somebody else?
We also weren't given many choices because I
Yeah,
don't know.
you cosplay as the Joker. That's what you do.
House. I wasn't allowed.
Some of us still haven't grown up.
When I was in elementary school, there were a set of books in our library about how to develop your ESP power, because it was the 70s and there were.
Yeah.
And one of them said that a lot of things that people consider to be extrasensory perception are just people that have enough creativity and imagination to look at something and see its uses beyond what it would normally be expected.
There was
they had, I don't remember what the item was, and they went out with like 100 different things you could use it for. So we used to do that. I mean, we when I worked in the juvenile detention facility as a therapist for the little teenage offenders, I would do that. I'd bring something in and I'd put it on a table. It's like, okay, you've got 15 minutes to write everything you could possibly do with this item, as a way, just imagination exercises, because they did not have the ability to think outside of a box at all.
We do have a few.
How many said bong?
Was that there?
I said, how many of them said bong? It was like
for one of them, I brought in a volleyball, and they're like, "Oh, well, we could use it to play basketball, or we could use it to play dodgeball, or we could use it to play kickball." And it's like, well, but what about if you did this? And what about if you did that? And then we watched Castaway afterwards to see, Wilson.
Yeah. I will say we do have a couple of people from the younger generation with us tonight. I mean, Iman, you are young enough to be most
of your child, yeah.
Yes.
You're a constant source of disappointment to me, son.
I'm sorry, Father, but I have an important task I must attend.
But you have lent into the whole imagination side. But
Indeed.
When we chat, you freely admit that you are a little bit different to your peer group. And we also have Midu in chat, who Midu's still in his teens, but we've had him on a stream before, and chatting to him, he doesn't talk like many people of his generation.
Yeah, he's wiser than his years.
He's wiser than his years. Yeah.
Most of us back in the day who were playing D&D were the kids who were different, and
yes, we were.
The other kids.
Yeah.
I was not cool. I didn't even pretend to be.
Me neither.
I mean, I had friends, but they also were all playing D&D with me. I mean, I was on sports teams, not in high school or anything like that. By the time I got to high school, I was so done with it. I'm like, nope, fuck off to any coach who ever approached me. And I was a big kid, so they wanted me for things. I'm like, nope, I'm an artist. But no, I mean, I think gamers tend to be, well, in the past, they tended to be very different thinking people. And
Yes,
talking
yes.
about generationally different, nowadays, now that it's so mainstream and so cool, everybody, the normies, are in the hobby. And that's good, but it also means that, like, you have to deal with regular people bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can. I mean, certainly newer games have been adapted to become more appealing to the normies.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is a simple fact. Fifth edition is very much immediate gratification. You've got lots of powers. Your characters are powerful. The chance of death is lower, and thus it appeals much more to the casual gamer. Whereas I think certainly most of us here, we're the sort of players who
Hardcore gamers, just say it. We're hardcore gamers.
Yeah, we're hardcore gamers. Where we're more patient with our characters. We will.
Speak for yourself. How many deaths have I had?
Oh yeah, you're just learning. You're just learning just how lethal the game is. Yeah.
Even with the character I'm into.
We don't. The thing is, we don't fear character death, but we don't seek it out either. That's the difference. We
That's the
understand.
thing. I think
We understand
the newer
fragility.
generation. Sorry.
We understand the fragility of our characters, and thus we take our time in assessing situations.
The newer generation sees a death as a disadvantage and as time wasted, which it definitely can be, but if anything, that shows that you're actually doing well because you're doing things that you're supposed to be doing. Like, I did a no deaths attempt on a live stream, but I died, but I still carried on.
Yeah.
I think the view of death as a waste of time is much more a
modern thing.
No, it's more of a normal person's approach to playing games. So a normal person plays a game as a diversion, as entertainment.
And they die and they just give up.
But
or they don't want to just die. They want it to count for something, or they want it to just be fun and then they're done. As
but
opposed
also,
to
a normal person game, if there is such a thing, like most board games, once somebody gets to the end, everyone stops playing. There's rarely a way out of the game where you're out of the game, but everyone else keeps playing.
Yeah,
if you see what I mean. And I think that's why people see that. Well, now I'm sitting by the sidelines while everybody's playing, and so I'm wasting this. That caused a waste of time. Whereas I don't see it that way at all in an RPG.
That's a perception, though. I think a lot of people who think that that's how the game works, like my character died, thus I'm out of the game. Yeah. What they don't realize is that as soon as your character dies, a good DM and a good group of players is like throwing a player's handbook at you and telling you to get your next character written up.
You
can show up in the next room.
Well, yeah.
That's how we did it all back in the day. I mean, like, okay, my character's dead. Although back in the day it was like, my character's dead. All right, let me pull another character out of my folder who's already ready.
I kind of see death as like a release or like giving freedom. Because
I was just about to
go back to my live stream.
I was just about to mention Mage's Musings, contrived character entrances. Yes.
The other thing that informs a lot of that, and this is kind of not where I guess we're past the low fantasy aspect and just into the general gab, but the other thing that I think informs a lot of that is there's a greater extent that I've seen and read about and stuff in the current gaming community of self-insert into characters. People take their characters really personally on a much greater average than they used to. I mean, I've watched some players get pissed off or start crying and leave the table, even back in the 80s. It happened. Yes. There were those players. But there's a lot more of them nowadays who really put themselves into their characters, and actions against their characters are actions against them. You know, they're very much in their character, and that's not exactly the healthiest behavior in my mind, my opinion. I don't think that it. I mean, It's great for getting into your role, but at the same time, it very much it immediately jumps into that adversarial play unintentionally, because now it is literally you versus the DM.
So the only thing I want to say to that is, I declare you dead, Blackleaf. You must leave the game. I can't believe Jack Chick actually predicted this type of gaming was going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, except for his. I mean, you're right, but his also his
just stop there. I'm right. You can stop.
No, it's a different context, though. I mean, I think there is a misconception by people who don't know, who are coming into the game, that think that once their character dies, they have to sit out and not play anymore.
Well, yeah, but that's just bad GMing. But it also boils down to video games, which
I'm not even. It's not even GMing. It's they come into the game thinking that's it.
But that's the game's thinking things, and then the GM and the group are responsible for breaking those preconceptions for them and showing them a different way, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but if the player doesn't give them the chance, then
that's
gets pissed off when
their
character dies, then,
I wonder if the video game respawning, like,
I was just about to say this.
yeah, and the thing that this brings up is that the old video games, the kind you had to stick a quarter into, you got 3 lives, and that was it.
You could often earn.
Yeah, I was raised on both,
more,
so
but, yeah.
I mean, extra lives go all the way back to pinball.
Yeah,
it just got harder and faster, and eventually you died.
The save spell or the binding point spell, that if your character dies and you cast that spell beforehand, you will automatically resurrect at that point, as you were before you left camp.
I was gonna say the original Doom is a prime example of that had no saves.
Well, there you have roguelikes, the old roguelikes.
That's true. Yeah, you had to finish the game all in one run, didn't you?
Yeah. Doom did not have any saves. That was brutal.
That's the thing. I was raised on the tail end of that generation where there was no save files and you had to sort of do everything all in one go. And I remember sticking out the challenge. Just because I died didn't mean I wanted to give up. I was like, no, I want to try even harder now.
Well, that was the thing with like the first Zelda game, if you remember. You had to get through all of it in one go.
Some people see that as discouraging, but I see it as encouraging. So to go back to my live stream briefly, it's like I was doing a no deaths attempt, but once I died, I felt free. I'm like, I could just play the game now.
Yeah.
So we came up in Gen X as the first video game generation, right? And for us, video games were a perfect analogy for life. They cost you money, nothing changed, they just got harder and faster, and eventually you died.
Yeah.
Done.
Hey, but if you kept trying at them long enough, you eventually got better, though.
Exactly.
No, you got kicked out of the arcade.
And it didn't take skill. All you had to do was memorize the pattern and do it over and over and over.
And that's life, baby. So all I want now for this generation is someone to make a video game. And maybe it exists and you'll all tell me it's this game because I don't fucking play video games anymore. Wherein you have to do a complex character creation like in an MMO or create a wrestler, whatever it is. But when they die, you can never play that character again, make a new character.
Oh, there are lots of permadeath games.
There are a few games with permadeath.
Like what ones? Tell me which ones. I want to know.
Well, not with necessarily. I mean, I haven't played any with complex character generation. Like right now, I'm playing Project Zomboid, for example, right? Where it's a zombie survival game that is hyper gritty. Okay. Like, for example, to operate a gun in this game, I have to put the magazine in the gun, and like. To use the magazine, I have to put the bullets in the magazine. They just don't automatically go into the magazine, and because I have the bullets on me. Anyways, I play my character through. I keep playing him. He can die any number of ways. He can get killed by zombies. He can die of disease. I had one guy die of a fever. I had one guy die of starvation because he got stuck out in the wilderness. But when you're dead, that guy is dead. You can start a new character. The world is persistent, which is cool because I've been able to find my old character and beat him over the head with a baseball bat and take my backpack. Take my backpack off of him and go, I want my stuff. But it is that, permadeath games are actually pretty common right now, especially in like the roguelikes and stuff like that. You can make your progress. Procedurally generated games are also popular. You have to look at the indie scene of games rather than the mainstream because the AAA games are all bullshit and just rehashing everything all over and over and over again, with occasional exceptions.
Good.
I know there some of the ones I play, you can make a permadeath character, like No Man's Sky. You can.
Yeah, a lot of them do have permadeath options, even if it's not the mainstream of a game. But yeah,
I'm thinking it doesn't have character creation.
Does or not?
I want a game.
It doesn't have an in-depth character creation, but XCOM has permadeath
I
mode.
want them to learn by making the character, investing the time, and then they die. And now they got to go make a whole new character.
So
yeah, XCOM is the closest thing to that, I think.
Huh? Sorry?
XCOM is the closest thing
No.
to
I
that.
heard you, Halakar didn't hear.
Oh, so the whole game is just making the character, and as soon as your character is done, you just die and you start over making a new one? Is that your...
No, you go on the adventure, but if you die, the character is dead. You got to go make a new character now.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That's
Project Zomboid. I can have read all these training because in the game you can find books to learn skills, and you develop skills over time by doing things. Like you can find books on electronics and angler magazines and hunting magazines and stuff to learn skills and abilities. And I had a character, like my longest lived character in that game has lived for 14 days. And he had accumulated a good amount of skill and ability. And I'd read all these books because you have a lot of downtime in the game because, of course, it's very gritty, realistic zombie survival. You're not always out there just killing things because it's a waste of energy, right? And sometimes it's cold, or sometimes it's foggy, or whatever, or sometimes there's just too many fucking zombies. So I had all this knowledge accumulated, and I managed to get a nice little hidey hole set up where I had a bunch of food, I had propane and all of that, and I died. So then I had to start all over again with a guy who is basic skills, go out, hopefully be able to get from where I started to where I know that guy died, so I can hole up in his hidey hole. But still, you had to start over again, and your starting spot is random based on your city.
What I'm saying, that's cool. Do that with the new Elder Scrolls.
What?
That's what I want. I want one of these big games that all the fucking kids play and get big fucking boners about when they're announcing the new one coming out, to add that, to break the cycle. No, it's never going to happen until someone does it and is successful. That's the secret, right?
Well, first of all, companies have to be willing to release complete video games.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yes.
That's a good joke. What's the next one?
I'd have to give a shit about video games.
No, I say it as a video gamer, but very few video games are complete when they're released these days.
It's very true.
Especially with all the online updates and stuff.
Bye.
Cheers, Daniel. See you, Daniel.
See ya.
Yeah, considering most games have a first day patch, even on day after you've installed.
Yeah, literally. Yep.
It's all you have now. One day, your first day update after you've installed the game.
Yeah, you installed a game which is 30 gigabytes. Oh, update file 60 gigabytes. What the fuck? Okay.
I gotta tell you though, one thing I'm really liking about this game is that it's just the way it's so micromanaged. Like if I have a can of food, I can't eat that can of food if I don't have a can opener. And to eat the food, I have to take time in game and watch it to open the can and then eat the food. It also tracks your boredom and your emotional state in the game. Like your character can be super depressed and super bored and panic and everything. It's super granular. It's nice.
Which one is that, Eli?
Project Zomboid.
Okay.
It's about a 10-year-old game. It's a asymmetric isometric map. Isometric map, and it's not super graphical, but the potential on it is massive. You can also get onto multiplayer servers, and it's got about 10 years worth of mods attached to it too, to where they've even modded it out to where you can cruise around in an RV and live in an RV if you want.
That's the thing. It's an old game, but I've noticed it's kind of blown up again recently.
Well, it's because there's a bunch of YouTubers that are doing it. Plus, it's still actively being developed. 10 years later. I mean, they just had a patch like a week ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it's it is probably my favorite survival game I've played so far, because a lot of them are challenging to a point, and then you just get to a point where you're so built up to where you're like, I don't have to worry about anything. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
anyways, role-playing games.
Well,
Anyway,
we've gone onto this organically because we were talking about why attitudes are different nowadays, and that is because of inspiration. It's because of inspiration from cats.
Where's Alf?
One thing I was going to mention quite a while ago, but I guess we're off topic now. But it's fine. You know, Fighting Fantasy books, they have a sorcery like set of 4 books.
Mm-hmm.
The way they do magic in those books is quite good because it costs stamina, but you have to also remember what the spell does. You can't just look at the spell book.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can only use that spell if I have the requisite stamina to do so, and I remember what it actually does.
Yes.
And it sort of gets you to think, right, do I want to use my stamina and then potentially die later on and use the spell, which might not even work, or do I want to try and brute force it?
It stops you spamming the magic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. And because your stamina is a maximum of 24 and some spells cost 4, it's like, what, you're going to do 6 spells and you're dead? No. You've got 4 books to get through, bro.
Yeah.
4 books.
I do wish that I could find a magic system in a game that was dark and dangerous, but also wasn't so freaking random. Like, everybody's like, oh, play DCC. No, DCC spells are just wackadoo bullshit. I do like low fantasy gaming. It's been one of the best I've found, where, at least in a D&D type of magic system, where you still have to roll to see if you can cast it. Your degree of success or failure, though, then determines whether or not you have to roll on a dark and dangerous magic chart. And that could be like, your wizard is afflicted with he can only whisper. Speaking of whisper, for like 12 days. It's kind of crazy. It's like,
MERP has elements of that.
yeah.
You can fail on your magic. You can send yourself insane. You can lose your magic ability, and you can attract the Dark Lord. And magic isn't particularly powerful.
I've also always liked the idea of having a magic system that allowed casters to cast above their level, but at an increased risk. I know back in 2nd edition, I had a chart that I borrowed the Turn Undead chart as an inspiration, to where the caster level, then the spell level, and then you could try to cast above your level. But if you screwed up, you could be looking at it. It just didn't go off, or there was a minor issue or a major issue, and some of them were completely out of bounds still. Yeah,
I got a crazy idea for that. Now, take that, make your spell mishap table, right? Lower stuff is minor stuff, burn some mana, take a d4 damage, whatever. Blah, blah. The higher stuff is where you get shit like blow up everybody in the room and stuff like that, turn into a frog, whatever.
or
And then on that chart, when you fail, the difference between the spell level and your level is the modifier to that d20 roll or whatever on the chart for the effects. So if you really want to go for that big stakes spell and fuck it up, well,
I like that.
Fuck it up big time. I like that.
That's an easy.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, that would
Very
be an easy
good.
change, because in the chart, I would just have to change. I would just have to substitute the modifier into the cross point instead of just the result.
Yeah, and then so you got like you roll a d20 on the chart, and at 10 and higher you start getting the crazy shit happening, right? So they always want those low rolls, but when you get above 15 on that roll, you're starting getting the really insane shit. Hey, I want to cast that level 7 spell. I'm level 2. You really want to roll that d20 with a +5 if you fail? Are you insane? Come on, John.
Speaking of magical risk, anyone remember the potion missability chart in AD&D?
Yes, I
No,
do.
I don't.
old DMG, there was a chart for what happened when you drank more than one potion at a time.
Well, potions took a while to take effect originally, and they were in your system for a while. So if you drank 2 potions within a half hour, you had to roll on this chart, and it could be anything from nothing happens to they cancel each other out to they turn permanent both within your system to they explode for 6 to 60 points of internal damage.
Yeah, and there were like
So it's effectively like mixing chemicals.
and there were fun little nuisance abilities too that in an old school context could still be a problem. Like they could give your character the hiccups or make him burping or something like that. Which if you're trying to sneak around the dungeon and your character's like, all right, there's trolls around here. You know?
I like the one. I can't remember where I saw it, but it was a spell mishap table where a D6 bunnies shoot out of your sleeves and dash off immediately into the forest and vanish. And I just love the idea of that happening in the middle of a big fight, and you fuck up your offensive spell, and you go, ha ha! Bing, 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 bing.
Sounds like the wild magic chart from.
I would make
Presto in
the
the
opponents
cartoon.
have to make a wisdom save or something, not to go, what the fuck? Just sort of stop in the middle of their attack and go, whoa, what?
That can be fun stuff. We had a character in one of my 5th edition games. My nephew's character ended up with a Wand of Wonder, which is a fun magic item. They're in the sewers, and they come across this Kelpie that's in the sewers, and they're like, how do we deal with this Kelpie? And he's like, I'm going to use the Wand of Wonder, and it summoned an elephant in the sewers. And so suddenly this elephant was like blocking the sewer and like occupying the Kelpie at that point. But
Things that break campaigns, deck of many things. Things that make campaigns wacko more awesome, Wand of Wonder.
Oh,
Bag of
Oh,
beans.
wow, squirrel.
the attic heater fund.
Heal that heater fund. I swear to God, I'm going to start taking up a buy Cody a laptop fund so he can use the computer whenever he wants.
That sounds like a worthy cause.
Yeah.
My new location. The eaves of my house.
You're in the loft.
I'm in the loft.
Well,
Yes.
and he needs some sound deadening too because he was ambushed by helicopters the other day.
No, that's just his criminal undertakings. But
Yeah.
The moment I started recording my video on Tuesday, a helicopter started hovering overhead. And I was just like,
all I can see, you've got like zero insulation in between those joists there, dude.
Yeah. Typical
You had the
European
motorbike
attic.
the other day, didn't you?
what was that,
yeah,
sir?
welcome to Europe, yeah.
You had a motorbike the other day.
What
Oh,
bugs
yeah,
it?
motorbikes.
I see that, and then I hear all my friends in the UK like complaining about their heating bills. I'm like, well, if you put some insulation in there,
It'll keep it cool in the summer and warm in the winter.
I mean, I've got no
Exactly.
insulation in my basement, but there's a whole other roof above me.
Oh,
We've
okay,
actually got
we're
a
talking
really
about no
thick-
insulation. I talk to a lot of South Americans through my job and just through social things and like that. They don't do insulation for the most part in South America in their houses. It's just not a thing they do. And they always ask me, like, how do you guys survive in winter? I'm like, insulation and heaters? That's how we survive in winter. How do you survive winter? Well, it's only 13 degrees. It's like, shut up.
I hate you.
People in California,
The floor to my loft is carpeted, and there is under the floorboards there is insulation. It's just the
You
roof.
got to put it in the walls,
Wow.
mate.
yeah, you need
We've
to get
got-
it in between those eaves.
See those eaves? You put pink stuff in there, and then you put
Yeah.
gyprock over it.
You
We've
can
got
even
cavity.
get just,
We've got cavity wall insulation, but we've also got houses either side, so we get the residual heat from the houses either side as well.
yeah, but it goes right out that roof, dude. For you up there, in the-
Don't turn me into my mother telling me I have to wear a hat because 90% of my body heat goes through my head. Okay, come on.
which proved to be bullshit. So our parents were lying
Yeah.
to us. So
Oh yeah.
Well, it's
shut her up by saying, so if I
30%.
just wear a hat and shoes, I can go out into the middle of winter and nothing else, and I'll be fine, Ma. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, it's funny. Here in the Midwest, coming from the Pacific Northwest, where we have a nice even temperature, right? Especially Western Washington, I spend much more time out in the air, in basically shorts and sandals and a hoodie, right? Whether it's 50 degrees, 40 degrees, or 70 degrees, the temperature
That's my insulation tonight.
dips a moment here in the Midwest, and suddenly everybody's bundling up like their extras in the thing, but and I'm still walking around in my shorts and my hoodie, and I think part of that is just acclimation to climate too. Like,
There's always that one guy, because I'm from the north of England. Everyone's wrapped up, and there's always that one guy with shorts and flip flops, and it's like, fucking hell, mate, who are you trying to impress?
We have that guy in Montreal right now.
Oh yeah. Those guys exist anywhere where there's cold. Now I used to work with a guy. I used to work with a guy. No joke. He was something wrong with his blood, so his complexion was beet red all the time, and his body temperature ran very high as a result. But it wasn't life threatening. It was just something he had to live with. We'd go have smoke breaks at work, and it'd be like -30 out, and we'd all have our parkas on, and so he'd just walk out in his work shirt, and it's like, "Are you not cold?" Nope, smoking away, happy as could be.
Well, the secret to all of those guys too, though, is what they don't tell you. And this is because I used to get cornered by my coworkers all the time. How can you be out there? It's snowy, aren't you cold? I'm like, I'm not standing around in the cold all the time. I'm going from my car to the office, going from the office to the car. I might do some light errands out there on the outside, and around here, like 50 degrees is not cold to me, but everybody starts bundling up at 50 degrees.
Right. Anyway, we have come to midnight. Anyway,
oh wow!
Yeah, we've come to midnight, and midnight is. There's my little pumpkin thing. So before the stream ends, those of you who have channels, I would like you to shill them, starting with the grumpy old Slan, who you told me you were grumpy today, which is the first time I've heard of you being grumpy.
Hey, finally!
Shill your channel, Slan.
He's no longer an imposter.
I'm the grumpy old Slan. That's the name of the channel. I do some talking about games. I look at old magazines and books and whatever. Takes my fancy, so that's about it, really. Last video was my last solo play session of the first French role-playing game called Le Château des Sortilèges. So
glad you could say it.
It should say English is your third language, Slan?
Yes.
So there we go. We have a polyglot with us. Yeah. I've got to say thank you, Squirrel Hermit, for this very kind $20. I do have a heater buried somewhere under all my wife's camping crap over there, which I will find at some point. But you probably tell us behind the pool table. Yeah. Halakar, you don't have a channel. But
I don't have a channel, so all I'll say is make sure you push all the buttons and stuff to like the old Geeks show here,
and everybody else who's on it.
Right.
And it's nice to have you on now. Your work situation has changed, because most people will just know you through your sarcastic comments in chat, winding everybody up.
Well, I got plenty of those.
Yes. Daniel doesn't have a channel. He's also disappeared. He's left himself in when he's taking his lad off to air rifle shooting, whatever. Bear.
Don't have any channels. Don't know what you're talking about. I'm a hermit.
No, you've got two.
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.com/@TSRPG. That's the Society of Role-Playing Gamers. We mostly do live plays there and have a show called the Four Color Cafe where we do interviews with people. This Sunday we have to do one. Normally we do it on Wednesdays. We're doing it on Sunday to facilitate. We're going to have Kevin Symbiota and Sean Robertson from Palladium Games on talking to us for a couple of hours. So you can come by and check that out. And then I have my own private channel, well, not private, personal channel, which is at Bear the Gen X GM, where I, don't give a shit. Enter at your own risk.
I'm moving around. I'll come to Joker in a little bit. You have my attention, but you were the last one to join, so you'll be the last one to
No, I was
show.
pointing to Bear because Bear's right in the middle of the screen. So I was pointing while he was talking.
Elfbait.
The channel is Elfbait. I stream on Sundays, just general game chat, and now I'm streaming every other Monday, running my By the Sword campaign, which is the OSE campaign set in a sword and sorcery setting. I'm also on GM Cody's game on alternating Sundays in a second edition game. But I talk about all sorts of games, ideas about gaming. Sometimes it's just general chat, but also not just RPGs. Sometimes it's miniatures talk. So
Good stuff. Iman.
Hi, my YouTube channel's Intellectual Quandaries, mostly video game stuff. I'm nearly at 300 subs, so if I could get to that, that would be amazing.
you've got more than me already.
I know, it's crazy.
Damn video games, you kids and your
Yeah.
The difference is,
Joker.
with my market, you guys, you all subscribe, right? The younger generation don't give a fuck. They just want to consume.
I know that.
Joker, you've just started a channel. I fixed your audio last weekend, didn't I?
Indeed, you did. Thank you.
But Joker, give a quick shill.
Yes, I do game walkthroughs. I've just done the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I'm currently working through Banishers, Ghost of Eden. And I will be doing new material towards the end of next week on Suicide Squad because a new playable character is being released. No guesses who the first one they're doing.
I don't know much about Suicide Squad, so
Well, no, but it's a certain person that's very close to my heart. Is being the
Oh,
first
Joker.
playable.
Yes.
the Joker, right? Okay.
Jack Napier.
I've put links to everyone's channel in the blurb. I've been very organized tonight. So if you are intrigued by anyone's channel who is on the panel, do click them, like them, subscribe them, whatever. We've got plenty of people in chat who've got channels as well. I've noticed RPG Grandma has been busily chatting away all night. RPG Grandma has a channel. We have Richard the Dungeon Crawler has got a channel as well. Make sure you check him out. Scrolling back. Ma Hawkman.
DM Cody was there earlier.
GM
Thanks,
Cody was
Mido.
there. If I've missed you out, I do apologize. Just give your channel a shout out in chat. I don't mind.
It was in earlier. Saxius.
Mage's Musing was in earlier.
Mage's Musing. Saxius hasn't got a channel. Mage's Musings, of course, check out his puppetry. Awesome. And as I've already said, the main point of doing tonight's stream was the fact that two of my panelists, Bear and Elfbait, are currently running low magic, low fantasy, very gritty, authentic feeling games. Elfbates is in a Conan style world, and Bears is in a medieval Europe inspired world. And if you like low magic, low fantasy style gaming, you could do a lot worse than checking out their live plays because they're good. So, and a number of us here playing them. Myself and Iman play in Bears game,
and
Slan.
Long the waiting list is.
And
hey, if you're asking me, Bear's up there with
that was
best
a
people
hit.
I've ever played with.
But it's,
I'm up there with what?
how long
Best people I've ever played with.
Stop. Well, you haven't played much, so it doesn't count.
And Slan, of course, Slan plays in Elfbait's Monday night games. So we play the games, we run the games, we enjoy the games, and that is the whole point of the hobby. And so I'm going to depart now. Thank you all. Thank you, Hungar, and thank you, Squirrel Hermit, for your donations tonight. Much appreciated. I've been the Old Geek. I'm going to end the stream because it's gone past pumpkin hour. Thank you, everybody.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Good night, everyone.